LoveLore Library. Chapter 379. Wei Bai felt her blood run cold. She couldn't make up a story anymore. She fiercely knocked on the system. I think it's time for the illusion to end. The system was lying on the keyboard, weakly saying, "My fingers are useless, I can't write the ending, wait for me to recover." Ning Yishu's movements were extremely fast. He had already stripped off his clothes. The two of them were pressed together. Wei Bai's face paled. "What are you doing?" Ning Yishu's eyes were malicious. "I promised you, I'll become your partner, but I don't want a spiritual relationship, I want a real." Halfway through his words, his arms wrapped around her even tighter. This posture was self-evident. Wei Bai's expression changed. "Scram, do you want to cause my cultivation to regress?" The water spirit scripture could only be cultivated by pure women. Once she lost her primordial yin, she would directly fall to the foundation establishment stage. Moreover, it would be difficult for her to advance her cultivation in the future. It was fine if she didn't struggle, but once she did, he almost couldn't suppress his excitement. Ning Yishu endured this terrible torture. His lips moved to her neck, and he said coldly, one word at a time. "See, you want to find someone stronger than you, but how can you be sure that if he destroys your cultivation, you can resist?" She was so stupid that he couldn't watch it anymore. She didn't know how to hide when she was scheming. When Wei Bai heard this, her whole body stiffened. Ning Yishu was so close, how could he not notice her trembling nervously? He hugged her, and suddenly smiled sorrowfully. Master, this call of a master had crushed all of his wishful and hopeless thoughts. Wei Bai turned her head blankly, but saw Ning Yishu's eyes were red. He reached out and gently touched her face, then suddenly kissed her softly. "Let's go back." Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 50. When he started to realize the desire in his heart and his feelings for her, it wasn't that he hadn't hardened his heart and wanted to give up everything and let the two of them wander in this illusion. She wouldn't be able to escape. He had also trapped himself. Wasn't this another form of being together? Ning Yishu took out the dagger and slit his wrist, feeding the dagger with his blood. An unknown red light, mixed with a few strands of gold, broke through the boundary of the illusion. The illusion began to collapse. Wei Bai still maintained that blank expression. Slowly, her body faded away. Ning Yishu used his dagger to destroy the illusion. He looked at the familiar spirit spring and the familiar grand heavens mountain disappearing bit by bit. He also saw the woman in his arms gradually become transparent. The illusory realm collapsed. Just as Ning Yishu broke out of the illusion, he found himself still standing in the same place of the labyrinth of illusions. He was in a trance and couldn't tell the difference between reality and illusion. Suddenly, the pain in his wrist pulled his mind back. This was the wound where he fed the dagger his blood. Ning Yishu heard a beast roar and suddenly remembered something. He had thrown Wei Bai near the blessed flower and attracted the guardian beast. They had been in the illusion for so long, but only a short while had passed in reality. Ning Yishu suddenly turned his head. At this moment, he was facing the most difficult choice in his life. Should he give up on her or help himself? Ning Yishu knew from a young age that it was every man for himself. Once he set his sights on a goal, he would persevere to achieve it. His biggest dream was to cultivate and attain the Tao. Roar! A monster with a green face, sharp fangs, black fur, and two mouths appeared in the fog. It slowly approached by Wei Bai's direction. Chapter 380. Ning Yishu struggled to take 2 steps forward as his heart clenched. He suddenly turned around and saw the 2 legs of the disgusting monster with 2 mouths stretching out its long fingernails. Under the fingernails, there was a section of the flying immortal skirt stained with blood in the fog. Wei Bai, Ning Yishu's mind went blank and the hesitation in his heart disappeared. At this moment, the most profound image flashed through his mind. It was actually the scene of her opening the door and smiling at him in the illusion. Idiot, next time, you better come find me earlier. Idiot, Ning Yishu abruptly turned around and ran forward with all his might without hesitation. The monster let out a delighted laugh as though it had seen delicious meat and was in a good mood. Its hand had just landed on Wei Wei Bai's body. A ray of red light mixed with gold pierced through the fog and its palm. The monster howled and roared. Ning Yishu attacked the monster and rolled to Wei Wei Bai's side. He raised his head and saw Wei Wei Bai lying quietly beside a rock. She looked battered and exhausted and her body was covered in blood. For a moment, he could not tell if she was dead or alive. Suddenly, the guardian beast opened its mouth full of fangs and charged toward Wei Wei Bai. It knocked Ning Yishu aside and was about to bite her. Even if its hand was chopped off, it still wanted to eat a woman. Ning Yishu saw that she was about to be taken away by the guardian beast and desperately tried to snatch her back. However, it was too late. The guardian beast's movements were crafty. Its movements were so fast that no one could see it clearly. It bit Wei Wei Bai's clothes and was about to leave. He only had time to grab hold of the hem of her skirt. The hem of the skirt was fragile and was torn apart. Ning Yishu's eyes widened as he stared at the dress in his hands. She would die. I have to save her. Ning Yishu chased with all his might, but the guardian beast was about to disappear into the fog. For the first time, he felt fear and despair. He was going to lose her. Ning Yishu's mind shook as a strange power gushed out from his dantian. That vast and mighty power was so terrifying that it could shake the entire Scarlet Een Mountain mystic realm. The 6 giant eyes in the sky began to tear apart. A pure yang golden energy slowly shattered the entire mystic realm. First level of the refinement stage, second level, third level. Peak of the refinement stage. Golden spirit energy overflowed from his dantian. A huge vortex of spiritual energy formed above his head. Foundation establishment was complete. The system was putting on a facial mask to protect its face when it saw this scene. Everyone was dumbfounded. Ning Yishu had already lost all reason. A huge amount of spiritual energy was pouring into him, and he was on the verge of exploding. His meridians, flesh, and blood had been tempered countless times by spiritual energy. After the foundation establishment stage, it didn't stop. Instead, it continued to grow crazily. Rumble. Lightning tribulation was triggered. He began to form his core. The system silently flipped through the book. The male lead was supposed to form his gold core 2 years later. In the end, it hadn't even been 2 fucking minutes, and he had already formed his core. There was a word for it. Terrifying. The terrifying Ning Yishu found that his whole body was filled with power. He flew forward, so fast that he didn't even leave a shadow behind. Soon, he caught up with the guardian beast. With a bang, he shattered the guardian beast. Amidst the flesh and blood, he reached out and hugged the falling Wei Wei Bai. The fog dispersed, and the golden energy began to counterattack and nibble away at the mystic realm's power. The mystic realm with tens of thousands of years of history had absorbed the spirit energy of tens of thousands of cultivators, accumulating a terrifying power that couldn't be calculated. And this power was all absorbed by the special pure yang energy in Ning Yishu's body. Quick, comma. Chapter 381. The male lead of this novel was a super cheat who absorbed everything he saw. After absorbing the spiritual aura of the secret realm and completely digesting it, he would probably be able to reach the late nascent soul stage. The system silently covered its eyes. No, it refused to accept such a retarded and brainless long story. Damn, an ordinary male lead suddenly broke through the cultivation barrier in less than a few minutes and rushed to the core formation stage in a few minutes. He was about to break through to the nascent soul stage. What kind of power was this? The power of love. What happened to the big setting of not being able to cultivate as a virgin? It was eaten by a dog. Hee, brainless author, give 10,001 stars and scram to the course literature section. This wasn't a trick at all. People only wrote foundation establishment for 1,000,000 words. Ning Yishu estimated that 10,000 words would break through the void and become an immortal. Ning Yishu easily passed the lightning tribulation and completed the core formation stage. His black hair grew to his calves, and his young body grew a lot taller, like a jade tree. He lowered his head, and his black eyes flowed with a golden light, with an aura of disdain for the world. Wei Wei Bai frowned, seeming to be a little uncomfortable, but she didn't wake up. Ning Yishu had read a lot of books and prepared for many years for cultivation. Now that he succeeded in forming his core, he vaguely knew that there was a very terrifying power in his body. If it was a normal time, he might be a little surprised. But now, his eyes were full of her bloody appearance. Ning Yishu tried to condense spiritual aura to treat her wound. The wound began to heal. Wei Wei Bai's tightly knitted brows slowly relaxed. Ning Yishu's brows also relaxed. He stared at her and said softly, "This time, I'm not late, right?" Idiot, he was indeed an idiot. He became an idiot for a woman. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 55. The secret realm began to collapse. The power accumulated for 10,000 years was almost all taken away by Ning Yishu. The system silently opened the side mission failure penalty form. Very good, the male lead's plot accelerated and rushed to the core formation stage. This was completely reasonable. There was no plot collapse. Therefore, neither its name nor Wei Wei Bai's name appeared on the punishment form. The system glanced at the label of the book, the unique and unhindered immortal Tao. Invincible feeling, just feeling good, awesome feeling good, routine brainless writing, I'm proud of being brainless. Does this mean that as long as the male lead is satisfied, the plot won't be considered a failure no matter how it collapses? Wei Wei Bai woke up in a daze and found herself being carried on someone's back. She rubbed her eyes and saw Ning Yishu's determined and calm side profile. Where are we? When Ning Yishu heard her voice, his body stiffened. Then he said, We're out of the mystic realm, Master. However, there was a huge change in the secret realm. Everyone inside died and the secret realm collapsed. They had only been inside for a day. But because of the time distortion, 10 days had passed in the outside world. In the past 10 days, many people had tried to rescue the people in the secret realm, but all of them had failed. The outstanding disciples of Grand Heaven's Mountain and Chiu Bai, who was a nascent soul cultivator, had all died. There were less than 10 people who had managed to escape. Wei Wei Bai snorted. It's good that they're dead. Some of those people from Grand Heaven's Mountain were Chiu Bai's disciples. This saves me the trouble of having to deal with them in the future. Ning Yishu didn't say anything. Instead, he slowly walked forward step by step. Wei Wei Bai's flying beast carriage followed behind. However, he wanted to carry her all the way down. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, Where are the things I asked you to take? Ning Yishu immediately said, I brought them with me. I'm waiting to give them to Master. Wei Wei Bai mocked, Why are you giving them to me? They're all low-grade magic treasures and low-grade spirit stones. If you want them, take them. Don't throw them away. Ning Yishu, you were clearly the one who risked your life to take them in the mystic realm. Now you don't want them. A woman's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the ocean. /save button below to record this reading record. Chapter 382. Wei Wei Bai rested her head on his shoulder, a trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. How did we get out of the arcane realm? Ning Yishu was silent for a moment, a trace of dark light flashed in his eyes. We just happened to fall into the gap of the arcane realm, and then we came out. Wei Wei Bai said, this must be because I'm in the nascent soul stage and have great luck, so I just happened to escape. Ning Yishu thought, you can believe this reason. Wei Wei Bai suddenly muttered to herself in doubt, I think I had a very long dream. Ning Yishu only felt that her words were like a feather, floating past his ears. He was a little nervous. Master, what did you dream of? Was it the same as him? She still remembered what happened in the fantasy realm. Wei Wei Bai had already thought about it. What happened in the fantasy realm was the turning point of her relationship with Ning Yishu. She remembered what happened in the fantasy realm, and then started to have a special affection for Ning Yishu. After all, vicious and cruel women also needed to fall in love, and once they fell in love, their affection would definitely increase. It was a perfect plan. Wei Wei Bai was about to open her mouth to say something. The system came out and interrupted, no, you're violating the character setting. Wei Wei Bai still had a beautiful expression on her face that said, I'm sure I can get more affection, ? The system said, most of the past information that you set for the character is to imitate the tragic experience of the male lead, completely arousing his pity. Wei Wei Bai still had a face of ? The system was helpless, so in his heart, you've already become a white lotus who does whatever she wants, kills, sets fires, and tortures others. It's not your fault, it's the world's fault. Wei Wei Bai thought, what kind of white lotus is killing and setting fires? A man-eating flower is more like it. Do you guys have some misunderstanding about the white lotus setting? The system said, your current persona needs to be vicious and vicious in the male lead's heart, and not a pitiful little cabbage. If you have the attitude of someone in love, it'll be fine. No matter how vicious you are, the male lead will find you especially cute, gentle, and kind. Wei Wei Bai, I'm already so vicious, but it's his own fault that he can't understand. Is that my fault? The system shamelessly admitted, that's right. If you don't take the blame, who will? In the end, the system said, you need to restore that vicious and ruthless image in the male lead's heart. Don't even think about dating for now. Wei Wei Bai, do you want her to carve the words vicious and vicious on her forehead and sprinkle some paint to make it more eye-catching? She weighed the pros and cons in her heart several times. Should she take the risk of breaking her character and speed up the pace of gaining favorability? She had still tortured Ning Yishu until he was beyond recognition. Whenever he saw her, he would think of the words vicious and vicious. Master. Ning Yishu noticed her puzzled silence and could not help but call out to her. Wei Wei Bai's face was bitter. She really did not dare to break her character. After all, the punishment of a family being struck by lightning was too scary. I had a dream. I dreamt that I was bitten by a wild beast, she said calmly. Ning Yishu's footsteps paused, and his eyes dimmed. We didn't meet any wild beasts, he said very calmly. He had completely erased his thoughts of killing her. Wei Wei Bai said tiredly, that's an inauspicious dream. Forget it, let's hurry back. Ning Yishu was silent for a while, then said, okay. Then he realized that Wei Wei Bai's breathing had become even and steady again. She had fallen asleep again. The labyrinth of illusions was a huge burden on her mind. Ning Yishu let the flying beast carriage run over, and then he got on the carriage. The carriage had been specially made, and was as big as a small room. Ning Yishu put her on the recliner, and then knelt beside her. Only now did he dare to reveal the affection in his eyes. Sure enough, he was the only one who remembered that illusion. Chapter 383. Ning Yishu reached out and gently stroked her face. After a long silence, he said, "If I'm strong enough, does that mean I don't have to be your disciple, but can be your man?" His fingers slowly touched her lips. Ning Yishu's eyes darkened. His fingers gently entered her lips and teeth. That moist touch made his body heat up. He endured this feeling. He pulled his hand back, then began to meditate and gather spirit energy. Core formation was not enough, nascent soul was not enough, but there were soul formation stage powerhouses. He wanted her to be able to live freely and arrogantly. She had a vicious personality, so she would offend many people in the future. If he was not strong enough, how could he protect her? Ning Yishu had a strong idea in his heart. He wanted to be strong enough that no one in the world could shake his position. Then, even if she overturned the sky, no one would be able to give her a hard time. This was the first time he cultivated so hard not for himself, but for someone else. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 60. The system was speechless. This increase in favorability is really magical. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, she saw a bright red HP bar above her head. The HP bar had decreased by half. Wei Wei Bai could not help but look around. Did she transmigrate again? This time it was a game world. In the end, wasn't this her own room in Grand Heavens Mountain? The system reminded her, the HP bar is given to you for free. This HP bar is how much you crumble in the male lead's heart. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. I crumbled half of my image in his heart. The system said, yes, logically he knows that you are a vicious woman, but because of the increase in favorability, he subconsciously thinks that you are very cute when you pretend to be vicious. Anyway, when he sees you, he is very happy. What does this have to do with my image crumbling? Wei Wei Bai was desperate. Ning Yishu was unhappy when he saw her, so how could his favorability increase? But if his favorability increased, the system would determine that her image crumbled as soon as he was happy. This side quest was probably to kill her. The system replied, because in the original novel, the male lead would feel upset whenever he saw Wei Wei Bai. That's why when the system determines whether you're violating the character setting, one of the conditions is whether you make him upset. Wei Wei Bai lay down weakly. Let lightning strike me to death. What kind of lousy mission is this? The system said, not only will the lightning strike you to death, but it will also strike you, your father, your sister, your ancestral grave, and the goldfish you raised. Wei Wei Bai said helplessly, it's one thing to kill you and your scumbag sister, but you want to kill my family too. It turned out that it and her scumbag sister held the same position in her heart. Ning Yishu's voice suddenly came from outside the door. Master. Wei Wei Bai shuddered. She glanced at the health bar above her head. Very good, it didn't collapse. She rearranged her expression and took out the expression pack that was specially made for evil female supporting characters. He raised his eyebrows and curled his lips, revealing a mocking sneer. Get in here. Ning Yishu walked in with a foot washing basin in his hands. Wei Wei Bai watched as he bent down and squatted by her feet with a respectful expression. Master, I heard that the moonlight flower at the top of the mountain has a calming effect, so I picked it for you to soak your feet. The moonlight flower withered very easily. It had to be picked within half a second when it bloomed, and then placed in a special box to preserve it. It took a lot of effort anyway. Wei Wei Bai showed an ungrateful and evil look. Then why aren't you taking off my shoes? Download the at https://m/sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Chapter 384. Ning Yishu immediately took off her shoes carefully and gently. The feet in the shoes were exquisite and cute. As he held them in his hands, his heart actually surged with a bit of restlessness. Then he put her feet in the water and gently rubbed them. Wei Wei Bai's expression suddenly changed. She lifted her feet and kicked him fiercely. Using such hot water, you're going to burn me to death. She used a lot of strength to kick him, so it was obvious that she was really dissatisfied. If Ning Yishu was an ordinary person, he would have probably suffered internal injuries from her kick. Master, I still have the moonlight flowers I picked. I'll get you another one right away. Wei Wei Bai snorted coldly. You're really a good-for-nothing. I don't know what else you can do. Come here. Ning Yishu raised his head and pressed a soft kiss on his lips. He suddenly froze. That special power went through his body and entered her body again. He wasn't an ordinary person now, so he could clearly feel how his power entered her body and how it repaired her meridians. It was as if the two of them had become one. Ning Yishu didn't have time to taste this kind of beauty before Wei Wei Bai pushed him away in disdain. Get lost. Don't be an eyesore. Ning Yishu stared deeply at her. His tone was still gentle and respectful. Yes, master. Wei Wei Bai suddenly frowned and squeezed his hand. You build your foundation. Ning Yishu pursed his lips. In fact, he had already formed his gold core and could have easily broken through to the nascent soul realm. This kind of cultivation speed was too shocking, so he didn't dare to show it. Plus, with the special power, he could actually hide his cultivation level. Therefore, he suppressed his cultivation level to the foundation building realm. Yes, master. Because the spiritual aura in the secret realm was abundant, I directly built my foundation. If Wei Wei Bai was a good master, she would definitely be overjoyed. Her disciple was simply a genius. From an ordinary person in the Hotian realm, she directly skipped the aura refining realm and rushed to the foundation building realm like a god. She simply broke the Guinness World Record in the cultivation world. But was Wei Wei Bai a good master? If she was, she would have been struck by lightning long ago. Therefore, she collected the most hateful master template, and her eyes flashed a cold light. Foundation establishment sure is fast. Are you going to form your core and form your nascent soul in no time? Then you'll become my master. The most hateful masters were those who were jealous of their disciples. Anyone who saw this kind of master would want to beat him to death. Ning Yishu looked up, his eyes full of sincerity and gentleness. Disciples' achievements today, isn't it all because of master's teachings? Bai Wei Wei and the system were shocked at the same time, this ability to lie with open eyes, worthy of the male lead. You disciple. Ning Yishu's eyes deepened, but his expression didn't change. He gently said, "Okay, I'll roll." He then calmly retreated. This feeling, this response. She felt like a gentle and magnanimous papa was looking at her willful and cute daughter. Wei Wei Bai looked at her HP bar and her whole body trembled. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit, her HP bar actually decreased by a few points. She was clearly so vicious. How blind must he be to think that her vicious character wasn't vicious? The system suddenly said, "The male lead is standing at your door." Wei Wei Bai, what is he standing at my door for? He finally reacted to my sarcasm and wants to beat me up. The system was silent for a while before saying, he is smiling. His smile is very affectionate. Bai Wei Wei. At the /crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com download. Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. If you like, Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here, comma. Chapter 385. The system said, in his heart, you've already been promoted from a shameless bitch to a super cute little princess. I think if you continue to do whatever you want for a few more days, the vicious image of you in his heart will be gone. Gone, then their whole family would be struck by lightning and disappear. Wei Wei Bai hugged her head in despair. This is forcing me to destroy a city, destroy a country, and slaughter all living things. The system also hugged its head in despair. I've read the book. This male lead is cold-hearted and black-bellied. If you slaughter a city or something, he'll probably be responsible for burying your body. He'll even think that you're cute and not pretentious, killing people when he wants to, such a magnanimous and pure personality. Wei Wei Bai said, this is a mental case. The system said, how many of those male leads in X points have a normal brain? Wei Wei Bai was speechless. The system's voice became heavy. Actually, I know that this side mission is like a mental case. That's why I rejected the request from the start, and the mainframe just sent the result yesterday. Wei Wei Bai couldn't wait. Does that mean I don't have to do the side mission anymore? The system said. Don't daydream. Do you think we're so easy to talk to? But I've lowered the difficulty for you. You just need to maintain your vicious image until the favorability is above 90, then you'll have completed the mission. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. Fuck you, raising favorability is destroying the character setting. If you don't destroy the character setting, you'll lose favorability. Who can get favorability above 90? Wei Wei Bai said, I have a curse word to say. The system said, no need for that, thank you. Suddenly, Ning Yishu's voice came from outside the door. Master, I've got a new basin of water for you. For the first time, Wei Wei Bai felt that it was so difficult to conquer a person. She asked the system, if I put the basin on his head, will he strangle me? The system said, I'm worried that he'll take the opportunity to wet himself and seduce you. Wei Wei Bai scratched her head helplessly. I can't go on like this. Before the strategy is successful, I can't maintain my character anymore. Suddenly, she sighed helplessly. I can only torture him until he's unrecognizable and crying for his father and mother. Favorability could drop, but his character setting couldn't be destroyed. She had no choice but to give up on gaining favorability from the strategy and maintain her vicious and poisonous HP bar so that it wouldn't continue to drop. She asked the system, what stage is 60 points of favorability? The system flipped through the favorability information. Oh, I like you so much that I can't wait to stick to you every day. Wei Wei Bai nodded. That's easy. Then, she put on the look of an evil master. What are you dawdling for? Are you unwilling to serve me? You've been gone for so long that your legs are broken. Ning Yishu immediately came in and washed her feet again, despite the hardship. Wei Wei Bai lazily criticized him while enjoying his pedicure. Suddenly, she said casually, oh right, help me send out the invitations in 2 days. Ning Yishu's heart warmed. She was willing to let him do things, which meant that she was starting to trust him. His voice became softer. Yes, master. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 63. Wei Wei Bai thought, this is a scary increase in favorability. It was so difficult to increase in the beginning, but now it's increasing with just one sentence. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, remember to write my purpose clearly on the invitation. Ning Yishu lowered his head and looked at her cute toes with a burning gaze. He massaged them carefully and said, what does master want me to write? Martial arts competition for a spouse. Ning Yishu was speechless. He thought about the meaning of this sentence for a while before finally raising his head. There was a sinister light in his eyes. Martial arts competition for a spouse. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 386. Wei Wei Bai was incomparably calm. That's right, I'm already old and in control of Grand Heaven's mountain, it's time to find a partner. Ning Yishu lowered his head, the coldness in his eyes becoming deeper. He unhurriedly kneaded her white feet, his tone incomparably calm. Master, you're still young, there shouldn't be a need to be so anxious. She was still young, even 100 years old was still young. These words made Wei Wei Bai's face turn red. Her face tightened as she kicked him away. What qualifications does a piece of trash like you have to comment on my decisions? Ning Yishu was kicked to the side, seemingly in a daze. Wei Wei Bai didn't care about his reaction at all. She reached for the flower hairpin on the side and began to dress up in front of the mirror. Finding a spouse through a martial arts competition is a move of the human world, I think it's quite good. Anyone who wants to become my Tao companion must defeat me. Ning Yishu thought of the illusion, she was this kind of person. The man she wanted had to be stronger than her. He had clearly warned her that a stronger man would bring danger to her. She also cultivated a cultivation technique that prevented her from mating with men. But she had forgotten. Ning Yishu gloomily raised his head, only to see Wei Wei Bai leaning on the chair, lazily smiling at the mirror. This faint smile was like the radiance of the moon, incomparably charming. She looked at the mirror. Am I beautiful? Ning Yishu felt his breathing become a bit heavy, he suppressed the dark desires that were growing in his heart. Every word, it was almost impossible to conceal the deep feelings in his tone. You're very beautiful, master, I've never seen a woman more beautiful than you. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 65. Wei Wei Bai's body trembled, she saw that her character's HP bar had fallen a bit. She had only smiled, but her vicious character's image in his heart had fallen a bit more. This was forcing her to be expressionless. Wei Wei Bai, slag stem, go to Google or Baidu or something. Help me find out how to shatter a man's delusions towards a woman. Ning Yishu clearly knew that she had a vicious heart, but he still felt that she was cute. She must have not hit him hard enough. The system was very responsible. If you want a man to not have any delusions about the woman he likes, there is a method that will definitely succeed. Wei Wei Bai was extremely anxious. Which method? The system replied, 3 steps. First, pick your feet in front of others. It's best if you don't wash your feet for a few years. You'll get athlete's foot. The system said, 2, use the finger you used to pick your boogers. 3, eat the boogers again. Wei Wei Bai. Blurg. This method could not disgust others, but it would disgust oneself to death first. Wei Wei Bai refused to use it. She decided to maintain her vicious side character mask. So she smirked at herself in the mirror. It's good that I'm beautiful. I'm so beautiful, I'll definitely attract soul formation cultivators to marry me. Ning Yishu lowered his head and knelt beside her. Suddenly, he felt that he was an eyesore beside her. She did not even look at him. Everything that happened in the illusion, only he remembered, only he carefully kept. And he, to her, was just a piece of trash. Wei Wei Bai said to the mirror with a love-struck expression, when the time comes, I'll be able to break through to the nascent soul stage with a soul formation cultivator. When I'm stronger than a soul formation cultivator, I'll find an even stronger one. To her, men were just objects that could be used. Ning Yishu's expression twisted for a moment. He could barely suppress the surging power in his body. //. Chapter 387. Wei Wei Bai suddenly sneered, what are you still doing here? You're only at the foundation establishment stage and you want to slack off. Hurry up and go meditate. When you reach the Aurus core stage, use half of your blood and the fire spiritual roots power in your body to heal my meridians. She had once been possessed by her own master. And now, she had learned all of those vicious methods one by one. And used them all on him. Ningishu's eyes flashed with a hint of bloodthirsty ferocity, then he immediately lowered his head to hide his terrifying expression. Yes, master. After Ningishu left. Wei Wei Bai's fingers trembled. Why do I feel like Ningishu wants to kill me? The system said, do you have any misconceptions about your stupid, vicious, hypocritical, and superficial super brainless character? Even I want to kill you when I see it. Look at all the things she said, all the things she did. Even if the male lead didn't kill her, it would still be true love. Wei Wei Bai looked up at her character's HP bar. Very good, it finally increased a little. The vicious character was kept. But the favorability didn't drop. This was true love. Wei Wei Bai began to meditate and cultivate. After all, this character had the merit of being diligent. She actually had a merit. What a surprise. After meditating and absorbing some spiritual energy, Wei Wei Bai began to feel drowsy. Cultivating was so boring. Slagstem, this spiritual energy seems to be golden. The system said, this is the male lead's pure yang energy. After absorbing it, you won't be able to sleep. As soon as it finished speaking, Bai Weiwei absorbed the pure yang energy that was similar to a drug, and her whole person fainted. Before she fell, a tall figure suddenly appeared beside her and carried her up. Her long flowing dress hung down. She quietly leaned on his chest and closed her eyes to sleep. Ningishu carried her and walked out. The moonlight flowers on the mountaintop had bloomed. When he came to find the moonlight flowers for her to calm her nerves, he saw this sea of flowers. His first reaction was to want to watch it with her. The moonlight flowers bloomed and withered. One by one, they were so beautiful that it was like a dream. Ningishu placed her in the flower field and laid down as well. He supported his face with his hands and looked at her quietly. Master, do I look good? He reached out and touched her face, his expression becoming incomparably gentle. I never thought that I would like any woman. Sometimes, when I see people in love being so clingy, sending flowers, and looking at clouds, I feel like there's something wrong with their brains. But today, I found out that once you fall in love with someone, you will naturally want to do such foolish things. If he liked something, he wanted to give it to her with both hands. As long as she was willing to look at him, he would be so happy that he could not sleep at night. He clearly knew what kind of person she was. Those who were ruthless, jealous, shallow in love with power, and had no value were all trash. If there was value to be made use of, he would kick them away. She had so many flaws, but when they entered his eyes, he naturally thought that she was cute in every way. He painstakingly suppressed his power because he knew what kind of person she was. Once she knew that his power was greater than hers, she would start to be defensive and afraid of him. It was all because of those who hurt her that she became so extreme. Ningishu's fingers slowly moved down. Her quiet and beautiful face, under the moonlight flowers, had a kind of clean and pure purity. I don't care how willfully and viciously you want to live. In fact, if she was happy, he could not wait to hold her like this every day. But, Ningishu's eyes gradually became twisted and sinister. How can you use yourself as a bargaining chip to seduce other men? Chapter 388. The system felt like it was repeating a pornographic novel if it had to verbally describe what happened last night. So it directly sent the recorded image to her. After Wei Wei Bai finished reading, she was silent for a long time. The system thought she was scared. Men will become perverted when they hold it in for too long. Your disciple seems to have held it in for too long. Wei Wei Bai was confused. I, the prettiest woman in this world, was lying on the ground naked and he could still hold it in. My disciple must have wilted. System, isn't the point that you were stripped naked? Wei Wei Bai came back to her senses. I feel like Ning Yishu is turning black. The system said, not only is he turning black, but his cultivation speed has also increased. He also has a lot of ancient treasures and scrolls, plus the bloodstained dagger that he unexpectedly obtained. It's about to be unlocked. There was a grandfatherly existence in the dagger. The heavenly soul was locked inside. Once it was awakened, Ning Yishu would become the master of the world. When that time comes, the male lead would be able to control the spiritual energy of the world, and Soar would be a piece of cake. Originally, it was supposed to be a plot of 18 million words, but now it can be finished with less than 80,000 words. Wei Wei Bai was speechless for a moment. So, the plot is broken. The system said, it's the male lead's plot that's broken, but your plot as the cannon fodder hasn't. In 2 months, you'll be refining him into a pill and throwing him off the cliff. You just have to promise that you can do it, and the plot won't be broken. Wei Wei Bai said, he'll probably become a deity in 2 months. How can a cannon fodder like me refine him into a pill? In the original work, Wei Wei Bai was able to refine Ning Yishu into a pill because Ning Yishu was just a normal person at that time. The system was not sincere. You have to believe that you can stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun. Wei Wei Bai, suddenly, a soul-stirring call came from outside the door. Master. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while before she suppressed her trembling voice. Then, he put on a vicious mask. What are you yelling for? Are you trying to wake me up? I'm so disheartened to hear your voice so early in the morning. Hurry up and get in here. In her heart, tears of sorrow flowed like a river. Was she trying to get a strategy, or was she trying to court death? Ning Yishu respectfully came in with a basin. Yes, master. He was here to serve Wei Wei Bai, just like an old ox who was willing to work without complaint. Even if Bai Wei Wei abused and scolded him, he was still willing to endure, loyal and devoted. Wei Wei Bai, I've seen masochists before, but I've never seen one who's shaking so much. Master, I have already sent out the marriage proposal. Ning Yishu lowered his head and said calmly. Wei Wei Bai smiled. That's good. Pass down the order and let the disciples of Grand Heaven's Mountain prepare. When the descendants of the 3 days are all here, I will begin to choose my future husband. Ning Yishu's eyes were gloomy, but he didn't reveal anything. Okay. Wei Wei Bai suddenly reached out and grabbed his clothes, pulling him forward. Come here for a moment. Ning Yishu couldn't help but raise his head. He saw that she had no choice but to lower her head and kiss him. A familiar power flowed into her body. Her meridians were damaged by the cold air of the water spirit scripture. And the unfamiliar power in his body just so happened to be a warm type, a good medicine to heal her. Wei Wei Bai kissed him for a while, then let go of him. She frowned. My current body is only about 60 to 70% healed. He knew what she was worried about. If her body wasn't good enough, her magic power wouldn't be strong enough. If she accidentally lost to a weaker man, she would definitely be very angry. Wei Wei Bai thought for a while, then suddenly said reluctantly, Don't leave me for the next few days. Ning Yishu suddenly raised his head, a hint of surprise flashing through his eyes. For the /4 for 4, comma. Chapter 389. You can search Transmigration System, Male God, come to Shushu. Com on Baidu to find the S. Wei Wei Bai coldly said, Come here. Ning Yishu obediently came to her side. She casually placed her hand on his shoulder with a hint of unconscious charm in her eyes. Come, hold me. Ning Yishu's fingers trembled and his muscles tightened. Are you deaf? Hold me. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows in dissatisfaction. Ning Yishu lowered his head and couldn't suppress the heat in his eyes. He reached out and easily picked her up. Just as he picked her up, her fingers pressed against his chest, and a ray of white light entered his body. Ning Yishu fiercely shook and a sharp pain followed. Very quickly, Wei Wei Bai guided the golden power from his chest and continuously entered her body. Ning Yishu was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat. Although the power she extracted was only a small part of his body, it couldn't injure him. She couldn't hurt him, but her method of extracting power was particularly insidious. If he really was a Foundation Establishment stage disciple, this kind of method of extracting spiritual energy would have crippled his body. Wei Wei Bai obtained a lot of golden power and her body suddenly became light. Because of the excess power, her black hair unexpectedly glowed and her face was bright red, more beautiful than a flower. Wei Wei Bai gave a satisfied sigh and then lazily curled up in his arms like a cat that had eaten its fill. Seeing her like this, Ning Yishu felt his heart beating faster and faster. The sharp pain turned into a strange feeling of satisfaction. Master, do you want more? Wei Wei Bai almost broke off her evil mask. She had a sinister face like the Black Mountain Demon and sucked his power. Wouldn't a normal person hold a grudge and feel disgusted? Could it be that Ning Yishu had a forbearing nature, so he was smiling at her on the surface, but in his heart he was peeling her skin and cutting her flesh? Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 68. Wei Wei Bai. Then, she looked up and saw that her character's HP bar had dropped to 1/3. She was in despair. She felt that she must be wearing a fake evil mask. This could even increase favorability. How could this destroy her vicious persona? Ning Yishu looked at the satisfied expression on her face and felt that she was so cute that he couldn't describe his feelings. If she could feel comfortable and happy while absorbing his power, he would want to send himself to her. The system looked at its despairing host. She then looked at the male lead, who obviously had a hole in his head and had a satisfied expression on his face. It silently ate the expired spicy strips. This was simply the daily life of the poop picker and his cat master. Wei Wei Bai's face was deathly pale. She had spent 3 days in agony. Over the past 3 days, her image in Ning Yishu's heart had crumbled to the point where only 1/10 of it remained. No matter how ruthless she was, he would tolerate her. Her favorability towards him increased instead of decreasing. He was already 70 years old. She and the system hugged each other as they trembled. They felt that the 9th heaven profound lightning was about to split them into pieces. This was the first time she saw the favorability increase. She was so scared that she wanted to beg Ning Yishu, the masochist of the century, not to increase it. Fortunately, she was quick-witted and suddenly said to him coldly, "Go and see, I heard that the soul formation stage brother Yu Qin has also come. Quickly get everyone in Grand Heaven's mountain to go and welcome him." Ning Yishu was silent for a moment before asking softly, "Yu Qin, immortal monarch?" Wei Wei Bai immediately put on an incomparably pretentious little girl's expression. "That's right, we've known each other for several decades. We once helped each other when we were cultivating together. He's extremely talented and his cultivation speed is even faster than mine. He's simply the man of my dreams." When she said this, she felt goosebumps all over her body. "Master, do you like him a lot?" Ning Yishu's voice deepened. "You'll see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you like." Chapter 390. Could Wei Wei Bai say that she didn't like him? She didn't even know if that Yu Qin Immortal was a cat or a dog. But to maintain her extremely stupid character, she could only force herself to hold on. She looked shy and infatuated. Brother Yu Qin is so perfect, anyone would like him. As she spoke, she spun in circles happily, just like the brainless Mary Sue, her eyes full of pink stars and her face full of infatuation. Ah, I didn't expect that he would receive an invitation and come back. He must be interested in me too. Ning Yishu's heart turned cold. He looked at her in a daze and realized that her eyes were full of love. She was so cold to him usually. But at this moment, she was as happy as a young girl in love. He slowly realized that she really wanted to find a man who was stronger than her. No, she liked that Yu Chen from the start, right? Wei Wei Bai suddenly waved her hand and a red wedding dress appeared. I believe that brother Yu Chen can definitely defeat everyone. When the time comes, I will directly admit defeat and be with him. This sentence was simply heart-wrenching. She let everyone compete, and the one who won the best would compete with her. And she had already decided on the man she wanted from the start. Ning Yishu's mind was a little blank. He looked at the red wedding dress in her hand, his eyes stinging and bloodshot. Why are you still in a daze here? Get lost. Wei Wei Bai's face turned cold, and she looked at him with a bit of disgust. The faint gentleness on Ning Yishu's face disappeared. He was silent for a while, then said, "Yes, master." When he turned around and walked out, the expression on his face was completely distorted. The suppressed darkness in his eyes seeped out bit by bit. The huge amount of spiritual power in his body was almost surging out. Ning Yishu sealed the crazy power in his body. If he couldn't control it now, it could destroy half of Grand Heaven's mountain. He didn't want her to be scared. Wei Wei Bai saw that he had left, and saw that her character's health bar had finally stabilized and was still rising. Just now, she had casually pulled a man over to save the situation. As expected, Ning Yishu felt very uncomfortable. Whenever he was upset, the main system would feel that she hadn't violated her character setting. Wei Wei Bai sighed. I feel that it's time for me to write my will. I'm afraid that I won't be able to reach 90 favorable impression points. Mistreating Ning Yishu like this. It would be strange if his favorability continued to increase, but she couldn't be gentle and friendly to increase his favorability. As soon as he refreshed, his persona collapsed. System, this is the first time I've seen the host so lacking in confidence. It suddenly felt like writing a suicide note. The groom contest began. Grand Heaven's mountain was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. The character, Sheet, was written everywhere. A group of several hundred-years-old youths gathered at the round plaza of Grand Heaven's mountain. When Wei Wei Bai stepped out of the door, she looked at the sky tragically and said, Tong, there are so many people here today. Can you play some normal background music? Every time there were many people, the most beautiful metal would automatically activate. The system said, you can only choose a few background songs. Wei Wei Bai asked, which ones? Perturbed, Love Business, the most dazzling ethnic trend, Tracker's Love, and a song of the Nameless King that can't be changed once it's played. It was so low that it made her feel like she was Bai Tsuehua from the neighboring village going to the market. The song of the Nameless King sounded very stylish. Wei Wei Bai asked, then what about the song of the king? The system hesitated. Once it's played, it can't be stopped. It will keep repeating. Are you sure you won't regret it? Wei Wei Bai said, I don't believe that the song of the king can be compared to Perturbed Bowl. Just as she finished choosing the song, Ning Yishu had already come to her side. He said calmly, Master, everyone is here. Chapter 391. Wei Wei Bai nodded. Then, her long dress fluttered in the wind as she flew to the round platform like an immortal. There were many young talents around, and there were also many men and women who came to watch the show. It looked unusually lively. Wei Wei Bai looked around as if she was looking for something. Ning Yishu had already walked to her side. Although he still had a respectful expression, his eyes were even more sinister and terrifying. He heard her say softly, "Where's Brother Yuchin?" As soon as she said this, Wei Wei Bai felt a chill run down her back, as if someone had stuffed ice cubes into her clothes. The evil character's HP bar above her head rose again. This meant that Ning Yishu was especially uncomfortable. Wei Wei Bai had never accepted such a fucked-up side mission. She maintained her infatuated expression and continued to look for Yuchin. In the original work's Pitiful Memories, there was a period of time when she did indeed go on a mission with Yuchin. And they got along quite well. So what she said was not a lie. Suddenly, a huge feather fan flew over with a dazzling light. A man dressed in white was sitting elegantly on a feather fan. He was handsome and elegant. "Wei Wei, I heard that you were looking for a cultivation partner, so I specially came out of seclusion and rushed over." Wei Wei Bai's dead fish eyes paused for a moment before she immediately adjusted her state of mind. She smiled shyly. "Brother Yuchin." Yes, in that short period of time together, Yuchin and Wei Wei Bai called each other good brother, good sister. Two pretentious people. Yuchin landed in front of her. The huge feather fan shrank, and he reached out to hold it and fanned it elegantly. "Sister, I haven't seen you in 20 years. You've actually become more beautiful." Yuchin smiled gently. Brother, I haven't seen you in 20 years, and you're already at the late stage of the soul formation stage." When Wei Wei Bai called him brother, she almost bit off her tongue. The wind at the top of the mountain was strong. The two of them were wearing long skirts and long clothes. For a moment, they looked like a celestial couple, leisurely and faintly discernible. They were just short of riding the wind and flying away together. Ding, I'm the most beautiful metal activated. Photoshop and beautify. There are many beauties at the scene and they are making ugly graffiti. Suddenly, everyone present felt that this immortal couple was exceptionally pleasing to the eye. Everything around him was dim and dull. He felt that only Wei Wei Bai was so beautiful. And Wei Wei Bai also heard it. The background music of King started playing. BGM Song of the King, loudspeaker roars, the cultivation world's largest XX factory has closed down. That son of a bitch boss, Wang He, owed 350 million yuan from eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling. He took his sister-in-law and ran away. We don't have a choice. We can only use beautiful women to pay for our wages. The original price of the peerless beauties was over 100, 200, and 300, but they were all priced at 990 yuan. 990 yuan. Wei Wei Bai, the system explained, this background music can stimulate people's desire to compete with each other. When there's a discount in the supermarket, don't people go crazy to buy it? When it's on sale on Taobao for $9.09 with shipping, don't you want to buy it? Wei Wei Bai, the system comforted her. Sometimes, the vulgar is the elegant. You, hold on. Wei Wei Bai felt that she couldn't hold on anymore. If she had known earlier, she would have chosen to cook. Why did she have to be the #1 beauty for no reason? In the end, it actually fell to 990 yuan. When Yuchin saw her, he didn't know why, but a special desire to plunder surged in his heart. He smiled faintly. Good sister, brother will go and defeat those people and marry you. Wei Wei Bai maintained her smiling mask. Go ahead, Ning Yishu stood at the side. The wind blew through his bangs, revealing his calm eyes. The. Chapter 392. This was the first time he saw Wei Wei Bai look at a man differently. Was it because that man was at the semi-god stage? The dagger in his pocket began to tremble slightly, emitting an ominous light. Ning Yishu slowly pressed his hand on the dagger and grabbed it fiercely. The dagger cut his palm and blood gushed out. All of it was absorbed by the dagger. But he didn't feel any pain at all. Wei Wei Bai and Yu Qin exchanged pleasantries for a while. The HP bar above her head slowly rose to 90%. In his heart, she had once again become that vicious woman from the beginning. Wei Wei Bai's smile stiffened as she sent Yu Qin away. Then, she waved her hand and announced the start of the marriage contest. Those who were interested in the contest lined up to take the number plate and were about to compete one by one. However, Yu Qin landed on the stage and fanned himself elegantly. All of you can come together. I'm still in a hurry to marry Sister Wei Wei. Late stage semi-god stage was almost invincible. Most of the people who came were at the nascent soul stage. In the cultivation world, there were many nascent soul stage cultivators who couldn't beat a semi-god stage cultivator. If it was normal times, everyone would definitely not come up to compete when they were rational. But for some reason, they looked up at Wei Wei Bai. They felt as if they were looking at a particularly beautiful piece of jade. If they didn't fight for it, it would be a loss. Therefore, several late-stage nascent soul stage male cultivators took out their life-bound magic weapons and jumped on the stage to compete. Wei Wei Bai stood high up and listened to the strange background music. She looked like she wanted to die but couldn't. Suddenly, Ning Yishu gently held her hand. Wei Wei Bai had been a vicious person for too long. She reflexively flung her hand away and her eyes turned cold. What are you doing? Ning Yishu's finger stopped in midair. He said softly, Master, can I go on stage to compete? Wei Wei Bai smiled coldly. You're just a foundation establishment stage trash. Do you want to go up and die? Ning Yishu suddenly smiled. His usually quiet and dull eyes suddenly glowed with a strange light. For a moment, even his aura changed. He maintained his unhurried tone. For Master, what is there to fear even if I die? Bai Wei Wei seemed to have just returned to her senses. She glanced at him indifferently. Since you want to die, then go ahead. After saying that, she kicked him down the stairs. Ning Yishu did not resist at all. The last trace of hesitation in his eyes completely disappeared. If it was said that at the beginning, he still wanted to quietly accompany her. But now, she had completely given up on him. The man she wanted was never a piece of trash like him. On the other hand, Wei Wei Bai's HP bar was completely full. In Ning Yishu's heart, her vicious personality had finally taken root. Yu Qin dealt with more than half of the pursuers very easily. He waved his magic fan with a calm smile on his face. Suddenly, a figure fell from a high place and lay on the ground. Yu Qin took a look. It seemed to be Wei Wei Bai's trash disciple who had just reached the foundation establishment stage. This kind of trash should have been dealt with long ago. Only Wei Wei Bai was still alive. The joke that he couldn't cultivate because of his single spiritual root had long spread throughout the cultivation world. Yu Qin casually waved his hand, and a terrifying and sharp attack directly attacked Ning Yishu, who was lying on the ground. The soul formation stage and the foundation establishment stage. The difference between heaven and earth was more than just the difference between heaven and earth. Yu Qin knew that he couldn't miss this attack. Ning Yishu would definitely die. Ning Yishu was also waiting. He quietly looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was standing high up, and saw the coldness in her eyes. When the attack came, he suddenly laughed. It was a self-deprecating laugh. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like. Chapter 393. Could it be that he was still hoping that she would look at him more? From the beginning, it was just his wishful thinking. In the illusion, he was the only one who was infatuated with her special dependence, her every frown and smile. The attack came crashing down, completely enveloping him. But Bai Weiwei never made a move to save him. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 65. Weiwei Bai heard the notification that the favorability had dropped, and her face became haggard. She knew that she had finally completely destroyed the little bit of pity in Ning Yishu's heart. Now, her vicious character did not collapse at all, and she was steadily full of health. Sigh, it won't be so easy for his favorability to increase in the future. Weiwei Bai said very rationally. It was rare for the system to not be sarcastic. It felt that this side mission was too crazy and unreasonable. It comforted, this mission will take a long time, you can take it slowly. Out of the 16 months, he had only stayed for a month now. Weiwei Bai said, it has to be like this, otherwise I wouldn't dare to pursue him. Now, it's fine for me to say that I like him, he definitely won't think that I'm a little white lotus. System, on the high platform, after that attack. Suddenly, the clear sky was covered with dark clouds, and a violent vortex appeared in the middle of the sky. The spirit energy suddenly changed. The spirit energy in a radius of millions of miles seemed to have received some kind of summon, and was crazily swept over by the vortex. Yu Qin had just finished off a few nascent soul stage cultivators when his expression suddenly changed. This was, someone was going to form a nascent soul. Who was so heaven-defying to be able to cause such a violent spirit energy fluctuation? The violent spirit energy fluctuation was like a hurricane, forcing everyone to retreat. Under that terrifying and vast vortex, all the spirit energy gathered in the clouds flashed like lightning and thunder. The illusion of a golden dragon hovered in the black spirit energy vortex. The lightning tribulation rumbled down. Everyone fled, afraid that they would be struck to death by this incomparably terrifying lightning tribulation. Even Yu Qin, who was in the late stage of soul formation, revealed a shocked expression. He quickly left. Wherever the lightning tribulation struck, not even a blade of grass grew. Weiwei Bai and the system were silent for a while. This isn't normal. Didn't he just form his gold core? How did you form your nascent soul? This was how the novel was written, and it ended before it even hit the shelves. Furthermore, the formation of a nascent soul was too terrifying. The system said, this is the male lead's own plot to ruin, it has nothing to do with us. Just remember to turn him into a pill and throw him off the cliff 2 months later. Weiwei Bai. If Ning Yishu is already in SOAR in 2 months, who am I going to kick? Such a terrifying cultivation speed was indeed possible. Seeing that the lightning tribulation was about to descend, Weiwei Bai immediately raised her sleeves and was about to flee for her life. The lightning tribulation would not only strike the person who was going through the tribulation. Everyone around would be struck. However, before she could fly up, an enormous and terrifying force pressed her down. Weiwei Bai felt a tightness in her chest. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Thunder rumbled, one after another, and struck down. Weiwei Bai quickly used all the abilities of this body to resist the lightning tribulation. Most of the lightning tribulation struck Ning Yishu's position, but she did not have a good time either. She was held in place by that enormous force and could not escape at all. This was definitely the most thrilling moment she had ever faced. She struggled to hold on, her treasures were damaged, and her spiritual energy was depleted. Every time she thought that she was going to die, she was crushed by the lightning tribulation and had to use her life points to buy life-saving items. The lightning tribulation would be separated. Then, when she caught her breath, the lightning tribulation would increase in intensity. Only then did Weiwei Bai know that the lightning that struck her was controlled by Ning Yishu. https://www.sashu.com/ Full text, https://www.sashu.com. Download text, https://www.sashu.com. Comma. Chapter 394. After he lost pity for her, he started to take revenge on her. After being struck by lightning for half a day, Wei Wei Bai was so tired that she wanted to just lie flat on the ground. Come on, let the lightning rain come more fiercely. But thinking of her character setting, she could only continue to hold on. When Wei Wei Bai suspected that she was about to turn into ashes, the color of the sky suddenly changed. A cold and gloomy power broke through the sky. The blood-stained dagger that belonged to Ning Yishu appeared in the sky. The power of the lightning and thunder was all swallowed by the dagger. The dagger was unlocked and the heavenly soul was awakened. The dagger kept growing and started to become crystal clear. In the end, it became a long sword with a destructive aura. A slender and beautiful hand simply held the hilt of the sword. All the surging attacks in the world calmed down. The dark clouds dispersed and golden light sprinkled down. A tall figure slowly walked out of the light. Wei Wei Bai lay on the ground. Her clothes were ragged and her face was pale. She looked up and saw him slowly approaching her. It was still the same familiar face, but his face was like a jade sculpture. His long eyebrows reached his temples and he was extraordinarily handsome. He slowly bent down and looked at her with a strange gaze that made her hair stand on end. Master, does it hurt? He revealed a gentle and affectionate smile. That once wooden expression was covered by an extraordinary radiance. Wei Wei Bai was about to speak, but when she opened her mouth, she wanted to vomit blood. Shock and disbelief flashed in her eyes. Ning Yishu. Ning Yishu's smile did not change, but his eyes were deep and gloomy. His voice was soft and hoarse. Wait for me, master. Before Wei Wei Bai could react, the blood-stained sword suddenly appeared. It broke through the sky and earth and shattered space to catch up to Yu Qin, who was already thousands of miles away from Grand Heaven's mountain. The sword pierced through the heart and shattered his soul. Yu Qin died. Killing a late-stage soul formation cultivator was like killing an ant. Ning Yishu summoned the blood-stained sword and brought Yu Chen's broken body. He tossed it far away, and the corpse was scattered all over the ground. Wei Wei Bai shuddered. What the fuck? How savage. After Ning Yishu finished killing people, he turned around and saw her trembling eyes. Was her heart aching for Yu Qin? His expression darkened. Master, the strongest person is already dead, so it's your turn to compete with me. She would compete with the man who won. If he won, she would be his. Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled. Her body was affected by the lightning tribulation. Her half-healed meridians were torn apart again. Competition. Yu Qin was deader than dead. He wasn't going to skin her alive, was he? Wei Wei Bai thought about how she should react. She was stupid and pretentious. She had touched a sore spot. Her lips trembled. You want to kill me? Ning Yishu's expression froze. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his face. As the smile grew wider, his eyes began to distort. I'll kill you. He said each word through gritted teeth. The coldness was enough to freeze a person completely. Didn't you want to kill me? In her eyes, he was just a piece of trash at the foundation establishment stage. When he wanted to compete, she didn't even ask him why. She threw away her feelings for him like trash. She even kicked him onto the competition stage and let him die. If he hadn't had a fortuitous encounter and unlocked the dagger, he would have really died. The moment he faced Yu Chen's attack, his heart turned completely cold. He was also completely awake. His master wasn't his little girl. Even though he was special to her in the illusory realm, she still wanted to use him. So what was he asking for? Her love. Chapter 395. Wei Wei Bai felt that her image as a stupid and poisonous person should have been as stable as Mount Tai. It definitely wouldn't collapse. She immediately changed her attitude and said in a gentle tone, "You are my disciple, why would I kill you? Only a pig would believe this." Ning Yishu was stunned. He repeated softly, "Master, you don't want to kill me. You believe this." Bai Weiwei was just about to reveal a smile and brush up a wave of favorability. However, in the next second, Ning Yishu's expression turned sinister. "If you don't want to kill me, then why are you with another man?" He wouldn't feel pain even if she killed him with her own hands. However, if she delivered herself into the hands of another man, that would be a murder to him. Wei Wei Bai really wanted to reach out her hand and ask him to listen to her explanation. However, before she could explain, Ning Yishu had already placed the sword on her neck. He asked softly, "Master, do you admit defeat?" Wei Wei Bai's face turned pale. "I admit defeat." There was no begging for mercy. There was only fear and a desire to live in her eyes. He knew that she didn't admit defeat at all in her heart. Instead, she was like a poisonous snake, pleading weakly on the surface. Once she found a chance, she would definitely hate him so much that she would kill him. Ning Yishu's smile was somewhat sorrowful. He clearly wanted to protect her. But he forced her into this situation. Ning Yishu put away his sword and hugged her. "If you admit defeat, we can get married." This sentence, even if he didn't get her approval, his heart would soften. In any case, immortal cultivators had a long time. There would be a day when she would be moved by him. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 70. He hugged her and walked back step by step. Grand Heaven's mountain was affected by the lightning tribulation and more than half of it was destroyed. Ning Yishu suddenly threw out a mustard seed bag. All things were hidden in the mustard seed bag. A blessed land was erected on Grand Heaven's mountain. In the blink of an eye, they walked in. Purple chi filled the air, pavilions, terraces, and pagodas, birdsong, and the fragrance of flowers. Wei Wei Bai took a look. Wasn't this Wei Wei Bai's childhood home that she and the system had simulated? Who would have thought that Ning Yishu would purposely build such a garden? Ning Yishu carried her to the side of the spirit spring. After the spirit spring was bombarded by the lightning tribulation, the mountain that covered it had disappeared, revealing it. He knew that Wei Wei Bai would not dare to resist, so he slowly took off her clothes and gently bathed her. Wei Wei Bai was lying on the edge of the spirit spring. From time to time, she would look at him in confusion and fear. It wasn't that Ning Yishu didn't understand her fear. After all, she had suffered so much to become the master of Grand Heaven's mountain. And now, his strength was clearly much stronger than hers. It was only natural that she would be disgusted and fearful. Ning Yishu pretended not to see the rejection in her eyes. After the shower, he carried the defenseless woman into the bedroom. In the middle of the room, there was a conspicuous red wedding dress. He began to put on the bright red wedding dress for her. Wei Wei Bai finally reacted. She looked at him suspiciously. "Are you cultivating some kind of demonic cultivation technique?" Ning Yishu paused in the middle of fixing her sleeves. He was silent for a moment before saying, "Don't worry, master. I'm cultivating the orthodox cultivation technique." Wei Wei Bai stiffly forced out a smile. "Could it be that you're some kind of powerful senior who succeeded in possessing someone's body?" Ning Yishu's heart was filled with a kind of bitter and sour pain. His voice was hoarse as he asked, "If I'm possessing someone's body, then your disciple is already dead." Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. You're really possessing someone's body. Ning Yishu raised his head and saw a ruthless disgust flash through her eyes. He was dazed for a moment. He asked in disbelief, do you care that much about that trash of a disciple of yours? Possessing someone's body meant that he was someone else. And Ning Yishu's soul had already disappeared. // Chapter 396. Wei Wei Bai desperately suppressed the killing intent in her eyes. She wanted to smile, but her smile was a bit ugly and her voice was affected. So it was a senior with great magical powers. That disciple of mine was very stupid and useless. If you killed him, then just kill him. When Wei Wei Bai said this, she couldn't suppress the anger in her eyes. Her whole body was tense and her flattering smile could be seen with difficulty. Ning Yishu stared at her in a daze. Her reaction, a huge wave of ecstasy hit him. He didn't dare to believe it. Did she care about him? Because she cared and found out that he might have been possessed, she looked at him with such anger and disgust. Her disguise was too clumsy. Anyone could see that although she said she didn't care, the anger in her eyes couldn't wait to burn him to death. The despair in Ning Yishu's eyes was dyed with a bit of hope. She still cared about him just a little bit. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 75. Wei Wei Bai, this favorability, just a little bit of perfunctory and it's going crazy. Ning Yishu finally smiled sincerely, I haven't been possessed. Master, I had a fortuitous encounter, that's why my cultivation speed is so amazing. Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a while, as if she was searching for some kind of heaven-defying fortuitous encounter that could make a person's cultivation soar. Ning Yishu stretched out his hand. There was a blood-stained dagger lying on it. This dagger hides a heavenly soul. It can control the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and can infinitely increase a person's cultivation speed. Wei Wei Bai looked at the dagger and suddenly reached out to grab it. But before she could touch it, her fingers were already burned. Ning Yishu maintained the same position, quietly watching her movements. It was as if he already knew that she would have this kind of reaction. Ning Yishu gently smiled, but his eyes were as cold as ice. I knew that Master was only pretending to be worried about me to find out my cultivation method. She kicked him onto the stage and watched as he was attacked by a spirit-severing cultivator. How could someone like her have the slightest bit of pity for him? Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but feel guilty when she saw that she couldn't seize it. She chuckled, "You're my disciple. Seeing that your cultivation is so high, I'm happy for you." That insincere look on her face. However, Ning Yishu no longer believed her words. In the illusion, she was able to smile at her enemies, but in the blink of an eye, she was able to use the cruelest method to kill her own master. She had never been a kind person. Instead, it was extremely vicious. Ning Yishu helped her put on the wedding dress. The bright red wedding dress dragged on the ground, and the bright light made her beautiful face look as charming as a peach blossom. Master is so handsome. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched and she suddenly stood up. Her wedding dress swayed with her steps. Ning Yishu fiercely grabbed her hand, his gaze sharp. "Master, where are you going?" Bai Wei Wei wanted to shake him off, but she hesitated and didn't dare to do so. She forced herself to smile. "Aren't we going to get married? Let's quickly go and worship the heavens and earth." The cultivation world was quite down to earth, and the wedding customs weren't much different from those of the human world. The only difference was that they would have a dual cultivation partner at the end. Ning Yishu's expression softened. The next moment, he heard her say, "We're going to get married. Can you give me half of the dagger's spiritual energy? I also want to break through to the spirit-severing stage." Ning Yishu's eyes were covered with a layer of frost. He pursed his lips and didn't say anything. Just when Wei Wei Bai thought he was going to kill someone, he suddenly laughed. We're going to get married. Whatever you want, I'll get it for you. Wei Wei Bai's smile brightened. Then can you give it to me now? Ning Yishu's smile gradually froze. He finally couldn't suppress the coldness in his eyes, and the surrounding spiritual energy began to fluctuate. Master, you only want my spiritual energy. You don't want me as a person. Chapter 397. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment. Just as she was about to defend herself, she was thrown onto the bed before she could say anything. Fuck. She raised her head in surprise and attacked. Unfortunately, that fierce attack was instantly neutralized. The spiritual energy in the air didn't listen to her command. She raised her hand, but it was firmly grasped by someone. A thin golden chain of spiritual power bound her hands, sealing all of the spiritual power in her body in an instant. Wei Wei Bai's vicious and unruly temper could no longer be suppressed. Ning Yishu, you trash, do you want to deceive your master and destroy your ancestors? Ning Yishu pressed her down. His black hair fell over his shoulders, and his eyes were cold without a trace of tenderness. In your eyes, have I always been trash that doesn't deserve you? Wei Wei Bai angrily glared at him. You had such a great opportunity but didn't give it to me. Instead, you took it for yourself. Now that you're stronger than me, you want to take revenge and torture me. Ning Yishu suddenly remembered. Her sect was once exterminated by her own master, and then she was tortured and possessed. In the end, she killed her master. He didn't participate in the past, so how did she kill her master alone? This doubt flashed through his mind. With this kind of experience, she must have thought that he came to take revenge and kill her. Wei Wei Bai opened her mouth and bit his arm. She, who had lost her spiritual energy, couldn't bite him at all. Seeing her desperately struggling, Ning Yishu gently held her head. He lowered his head and captured her lips. He rubbed and licked, as if he wanted to swallow her whole. This kiss was filled with despair and pity. Wei Wei Bai's scalp went numb from his kiss. With great difficulty, he waited until he was done kissing her. Only then did he reluctantly release her. Seeing that her eyes were watery and her cheeks were bright red from his kiss, the restless dark possessiveness in his heart dissipated a little. He picked her up. I once thought of sharing this great opportunity with you, so that your cultivation path would be smoother. Ning Yishu's footsteps were extremely fast. Soon, they arrived at Grand Heaven's Mountain, the place where the dual cultivation brother's soul was branded. Wei Wei Bai's face was a little pale, and her eyes were still filled with uncertainty. He didn't know what Ning Yishu was planning. Ning Yishu placed her, who had lost her spiritual energy, on top of the soul branding array. It's a pity that I'm worried. Master, you're too powerful. In the illusion, he knew her character. She had never been attracted to anyone. It was only special to someone because that person had value. The only person who could make her happy was Yu Qin. Yu Qin was killed by him, so she probably hated him a lot. Ning Yishu began to extend his finger, and streams of powerful golden spiritual energy began to modify the soul branding array. The function of this spirit array was to brand a soul imprint on each other's souls. This mark allowed people to know where their partner was, whether they were dead or not, and other simple information. Furthermore, it was very easy to undo it. The spirit design slowly became more complex. The complicated patterns were like chains, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Wei Wei Bai also knew some common knowledge about spirit arrays. She felt that something was wrong when she saw this spirit array. What are you doing? Ning Yishu. Ning Yishu injected his best spiritual energy into the spirit array. In the golden light, his expression became stubborn and crazy. Soul branding. No, I want to lock the soul. No one will be able to undo our dual cultivation imprint. He walked to the middle of the spirit array and looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the ground without any strength. The madness in his eyes finally revealed itself. Chapter 398. Master, I know you don't like me, he said softly. Wei Wei Bai, you know yourself well. He saw the undisguised coldness in her eyes and laughed coldly. It's a pity that you and I, master and disciple, are going to be locked together forever. The array was activated. Golden light surged all over the sky. Ning Yishu said loudly, I, Ning Yishu, am willing to be with Wei Wei Bai forever. With the heavens and earth as the medium, with all living things as witnesses, with souls as sacrifice, and with life and death as our bond. The words of the oath triggered the formation. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was in the background. Ning Yishu had finished his oath and was going through the wedding steps alone. She was tied up like a pig and thrown into the middle of the array, unable to move. The system said, something's wrong with this array. Wei Wei Bai said, isn't it like this in the cultivation world? Putting a mark on a dual cultivation partner is like putting a stamp on a piece of pork and selling it. Ning Yishu's array was at most a little more complicated, but they couldn't get a divorce. It was better if they couldn't get a divorce. That way, he would feel safe and his favorability would increase. The system was silent for a while, as if it was looking for something. Suddenly, its tone became serious. Oh my God, Ning Yishu's lungs. This ancient array can really lock souls. It was Wei Wei Bai's first time hearing its tone so serious. If you can't lock souls, I'll break the spiritual chains for you. Get up and fight him. Wei Wei Bai said, fight? No, how much life points do you need to break the chains for me? The system said generously, this time, it's all on me. It's free. Hurry up and stop the soul-locking array. Wei Wei Bai was tired, why should I stop it? I didn't violate my character setting. The system was going crazy. It's not a matter of your character setting. It's a matter of the array that Ning Yishu created. It's able to lock down the system's ability to traverse through space. If you really end up soul-bonded with him, you won't be able to leave once the 16 months are up. Wei Wei Bai, you lousy system. How could you let someone from a different plane lock the passage back to their home? This was too useless. Ning Yishu came to her side and saw that she was dressed in red. Her face was pale, and she seemed to be struggling with all her might. She raised her head, and her mask of disguise finally shattered. Ning Yishu, you're crazy. This array will entangle our two souls together. Of course Ning Yishu knew what she was afraid of. She had always looked down on him, even though her personality was vicious and superficial. But what she hated the most was being tied up and threatened, and he wanted to completely trap her by his side. Ning Yishu slowly placed his hand on her chest. In the center of his palm was the shrinking array. His eyes were red, and his expression was firm and twisted. Master, just stay with me. I'll give you whatever you want. Instead of giving it to her now, only for her to kick him away. People can't be too greedy. You can't just want my abilities and not me. These words were said miserably and aggrievedly. But his movements were ruthless and heartless. The array was pressed into her chest bit by bit. Under the golden light, the despair in her eyes could be seen clearly. The array in Ning Yishu's hand completely entered her body. At the same time, the same array appeared on his chest. Their souls slowly intertwined with each other. Ning Yishu reached out and gently stroked her delicate face. His body couldn't help but tremble. Master, I know you don't want to, but I'm very happy. I'm very happy that we can be together forever. His brows relaxed, and a smile spread from his eyes to the corners of his mouth. He smiled with unusual satisfaction. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 80. Transmigration system, male god, come here. / transmigration system, male god, come here. / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 399. Wei Wei Bai's entire body trembled. A strange power came from the depths of her body. It was given to her by the system for free. The feeling of one's soul being entangled with another's soul was indescribable. She suddenly found that the chains on her hands had broken. She didn't think much about it. She reached out and slapped his face. You trash, you dare to think about me. Traitor, evil creature. Her soul could be broken, but her character couldn't be messed up. Ning Yishu's pupils shrank. He found that the power of his array was beginning to shatter. She still had the strength to resist. He firmly held her body. Master, don't struggle. Let our souls be entangled together. Wei Wei Bai didn't want to be tormented like this, but the system was forcing her. It wasn't easy for her. She could almost see her own soul being torn apart by the two forces. Ning Yishu also felt it. His eyes were filled with fear. If he wasn't careful, her soul would be torn to pieces. He panicked. When he was making the array, he didn't think about going back on his words. So it was impossible to change it. He tried his best to stop the golden power from flowing into her soul, but the array's power had already started. He couldn't stop it. Ning Yishu's anger exploded. He firmly grabbed her shoulder. Looking at her pained face, he finally collapsed. Master, do you hate me that much? You would rather risk your soul being destroyed to resist the formation of your soul? She was clearly a selfish and afraid person. To not be with him, she didn't hesitate to destroy herself. Wei Wei Bai didn't know what to say. This was all the system's fault. She had a hard time carrying it. Moreover, her head was spinning. She couldn't care about his emotions. The two forces in her body were fighting. She felt like she was thrown into a laundry bucket. The world was spinning non-stop. This kind of tearing pain and discomfort was not physical, so even painkillers were useless. Ning Yishu saw her trembling in pain. He felt like his heart was about to split open. He suddenly took out a dagger. The dagger emitted a burst of light. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth condensed. He pulled out the spirit root and completely awakened the heavenly soul in the dagger. He wanted the heavenly soul to destroy his array formation so that it would not wreak havoc in Wei Wei Bai's body. This was the only way to save her. Wei Wei Bai vomited a mouthful of blood. She couldn't help but call out to the system, I'm not going to die like this, am I? This was the first time he had experienced such pain. He felt as if his body was about to be torn into pieces. The system was still rummaging through the cabinets to find something that could suppress Wei Wei Bai's pain, but it wanted to buy a soul-healing item. It was beyond what the two of them could bear. The system suddenly said, Don't be afraid, I will save you. Now was not the time to be sloppy. It reached out and took out the treasure that it could not use easily. Once this thing was used, it would be in a lot of trouble. But it couldn't care less. Just as he was about to use it, the system suddenly paused. Because the dagger in Ning Yishu's hand had pierced into his own body. He peeled off his skin and cut his flesh, digging into his bones inch by inch, and pulled out his own spirit root. A huge and rich pure golden energy began to overflow from his body. The blood mark on the dagger was slowly dissolved by the golden energy, and his spirit root was also slowly swallowed by the dagger. The pain was bone deep, but it was not as painful as a look of disgust in her eyes. Ning Yishu's bloody hand slowly touched her shocked and frightened face. Wei Wei, I forced you to get married. I'm so bad, aren't I? Chapter 400. Wei Wei Bai, I forced you to get married. I'm really bad, aren't I? He revealed a comforting smile, but tears of blood slowly flowed out from his eyes. Once his spiritual root was destroyed, he was like a cripple. Although you don't remember, I said that you can bully whoever you want in the future. If I bully you, I will punish myself. He was only crazily hoping that he could get her. Ning Yishu's mouth leaked blood. He finally dug out his spiritual root, which was completely swallowed by the dagger. The blood mark disappeared. A huge sword appeared, connecting the sky to the earth. Spiritual energy surged. Ning Yishu had lost his spiritual root, so he was a cripple. He reached out to hold the edge of the sword, and his blood seeped in. The sword's light became gentle, enveloping them. Their entangled souls, under the pressure of the sword's light, slowly unraveled. Ning Yishu could clearly feel the sound of their souls separating. Tears of blood flowed down his cheeks. His complexion darkened, and he became thin and haggard. Wei Wei Bai's body also slowly stabilized. She struggled to look at him a few times, her expression complicated. The torment of her soul made her extremely tired. Ning Yishu tried to smile. You don't want us to get married, so I won't force you. Go to sleep. He gently leaned over, and gently kissed her lips. There was no desire, only tender care. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 85. Wei Wei Bai couldn't hold on, and fainted as soon as she closed her eyes. The system let go of its hand that was holding the treasure chest, and fell silent again. Wei Wei Bai had a splitting headache. She felt like her body had been torn apart several times. Every time, she was crushed into a paper person by a tanker truck, and then blown back by a pump. She struggled to wake up, and saw herself lying on the bed. It was still the room she stayed in at Grand Heavens Mountain. She looked at the favorability, 85. It increased again. Wei Wei Bai thought that she had already erased all of Ning Yishu's favorable impression points. She was very confident in her malicious character. It was so poisonous that he wanted to beat himself to death. His favorability actually increased. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a long time before she knocked on the system. Is Ning Yishu's spiritual root crippled? The system said faintly, it was completely destroyed, so the plot has returned to normal. Ning Yishu is a normal person again. Wei Wei Bai sighed. I think he's been ruined by me. The system said in a deep voice, don't feel guilty. Have you ever seen a male protagonist who doesn't know how to counterattack? Ning Yishu is an authentic and undiscounted good-for-nothing male lead. If you don't beat him into the dust, he won't awaken. Wei Wei Bai asked, how can he make a comeback when his spiritual root is gone? The system said, that's a headache for authors. He can definitely make a comeback. If he doesn't, he can't write a book. Wei Wei Bai suddenly looked up. She heard heavy footsteps. The footsteps stopped in front of her door, and Ning Yishu's voice came. Master. Wei Wei Bai's face was tense. Come in. Ning Yishu walked in with a basin in his hands. He lowered his head, his hair was gray, and his footsteps were heavy but light. He looked much more haggard. People who lost their spiritual roots had no fate with the path of cultivation. Ning Yishu lowered his head and wet the towel, intending to help Wei Wei Bai wash up. Although she was in the nascent soul stage and could use spells to clean herself, he knew that she liked to be served. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, raise your head. Ning Yishu fell silent. His body stiffened. Bai Weiwei angrily reached out and lifted his chin. Crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download Transmigration system, Adonis, come here and read this on your phone, https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 401. She suddenly could not continue the words in her mouth. His face was extremely pale. Although his face was still young, his expression was extremely tired, like a person whose vitality had been sucked out and could die at any time. Even the color of his hair had turned gray. Compared to the extraordinarily handsome and spirited him from before, this was simply tragic to the point of tears and heartache. Weiwei felt that she might break her character's setting because she saw him so miserable. She felt that if she continued to torture him, she would not be able to get past her conscience. You. Forget it, go down. Weiwei let go of her hand and let him leave with a look of disdain. It seemed that she did not even have the heart to torture and take revenge on him. Ning Yishu held the towel and was stunned for a moment before he said softly, "Master, let me stay." Weiwei looked at his haggard face that had lost its vitality and could not say anything vicious. The dignified male lead of a refreshing novel had become the main force in a torturing novel with a crippled spirit root. Ning Yishu saw that she was not chasing him away, so he walked over and gave her a towel and prepared her clothes and socks. Bai Weiwei felt that she really couldn't put on a vicious persona. Ning Yishu only said after everything was done, "Then I'll go down, master." Weiwei could not say anything after telling him to get lost. After Ning Yishu left, Weiwei looked at her 85 favorability with a haggard face. "This is the first time I don't want to torture someone." Ning Yishu looked miserable and could not torture him. The system said, "He doesn't have a spirit root, but he still has fate. The entire plane's fate is on him, and there is no room for discussion. The awakening of the heavenly soul ate his spirit root, so his fate points will be enhanced by the heavenly soul's spirit root." Weiwei looked at the health bar on top of her head and was as steady as Mount Tai. In Ning Yishu's heart, her evil character's setting could not be broken. Therefore, she decided not to torture herself. She would happily complete the mission and not make things difficult for herself. Ning Yishu struggled to carry the water bucket. He was now a cripple and didn't have much time left. After all, if his spirit root was completely destroyed, his body would also deteriorate. Suddenly, the bucket slipped out of his hand and he started coughing violently. His body had already collapsed to such an extent that he couldn't even lift a bucket of water. She probably wouldn't like such a piece of trash. Ning Yishu thought that she would kill him as soon as she opened her eyes. Or perhaps, after seeing him like this, he wanted to keep him and slowly torture him to death. Ning Yishu laughed self-deprecatingly. He struggled to stand up straight, but when he looked up, his entire body froze. To his surprise, Weiwei was sitting on the wall. Her clothes were as white as snow, and her features were picturesque. Beside her, a cluster of red flowers could not compare to her beauty. She looked at him coldly with an expressionless face. Ning Yishu suddenly lowered his head in embarrassment. "Master." No matter how useless he was in the past, he wasn't so weak that he couldn't even lift a bucket of water. When he saw Weiwei, his heart actually felt inferior and flustered. Weiwei suddenly waved her hand and the wet parts of his body dried up. "You're simply embarrassing me." Ning Yishu pursed his lips and stood up straight, trying his best to bear with her disdain. "My disciple doesn't need to do such menial work." Weiwei's words carried a trace of anger, but she didn't reprimand him coldly. Ning Yishu was stunned and looked up in disbelief. He saw Weiwei jump down from the wall, turn around and walk away. When she reached the corner, she suddenly turned around and frowned slightly. What are you standing there for? Follow me. Ning Yishu hesitated for a moment before he staggered to follow her. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 402. Because he was too anxious, he actually sprained his ankle and his entire body was about to fall forward. In the next moment, his entire body fell into a familiar embrace filled with a familiar fragrance. Wei Wei Bai firmly hugged him. She disdainfully said, "How can you not even walk properly? How can you be my disciple when you're this weak?" Ning Yishu only felt that his nose was filled with her beautiful scent. When he heard her disdain, his heart sank. When he pulled out his own spirit root to save her, he already knew that he would definitely die. Before she woke up, he should have already committed suicide. But when he thought of not being able to see her in his last days, he felt unreconciled. She would definitely be disgusted when she saw a piece of trash like him. Raise your head. Don't shrink back like a little girl. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said. Ning Yishu could only barely stand up straight. When he raised his head, he discovered that the two of them had already returned to her room. Wei Wei Bai pushed him, "Go soak in the bath." Ning Yishu saw that there was actually a bathtub made of jade placed in the middle of the room. This bathtub was a very rare magic treasure that could repair damaged bodies. Moreover, the bath water was filled with all kinds of heavenly treasures. Ning Yishu suddenly hesitated. His unswerving determination and ruthless nature had almost been worn away by her. Wei Wei Bai couldn't bear to see him dilly-dallying. "Hurry up and go in. Do you still want me to take off your clothes?" Ning Yishu turned his head. His eyes were filled with all kinds of complicated emotions. His tone was still calm. "I thought that Master wanted to kill me." She thought that he was a vengeful person with a vicious nature. In her eyes, wasn't he an extremely evil person who wanted to force her into a corner? Wei Wei Bai coldly snorted, "I really want to kill you. I have never suffered this kind of humiliation before." Ning Yishu said calmly, "You can punish me to vent your anger." Bai Weiwei suddenly flew up, grabbed him, and threw him into the bathwater. The medicine immediately soaked into his body. His shattered meridians and deteriorating body immediately felt a sharp pain. Ning Yishu sucked in a breath of cold air. Bai Weiwei reached out and pressed down on his head, fiercely pushing him into the water. "I'll punish you. You have to bathe me every day." Ning Yishu knew that if these herbs were used on people with spiritual roots, they would have a very good effect. Using it on a cripple like him would at most allow him to maintain his health and extend his lifespan. Compared to the rare and precious medicinal herbs that she had used to extend his life, it was too much of a loss. Ning Yishu, on the other hand, was starting to feel afraid. He was so disappointed that he was in despair. He thought that he could finally greedily stay by her side for a few days and then die peacefully. But how could she break his peaceful state of mind and set off huge waves in his heart again? Ning Yishu suddenly reached out and grabbed her fingers so hard. He suddenly said in a cold voice, "Master, what do you mean? Don't give him so much hope. He won't be able to suppress the crazy possessiveness in his heart." Wei Wei Bai suddenly became silent. Her face revealed a trace of suspicious annoyance and shyness. Ning Yishu saw her expression and suspected that there was something wrong with his eyes. She frowned and hesitated for a moment before asking, "Is that you?" Ning Yishu had a face of doubt, but he saw her thin lips slightly open and her words were clearly heard. Ning, is that you?" In the illusion, she had always called him Ning. Ning Yishu's body shook as he looked at her in disbelief. His heart actually began to beat faster. Her voice became soft, "When you took out your spiritual root to save me, I had a dream." // Chapter 403. Dream? Was it their experience together in the illusion? Ning Yishu stood in the potion. The pain of the potion healing his body did not affect him at all. He saw a bronze mirror behind her. His face was gray and his hair was gray. He did not look like he did in the illusion at all. Ning Yishu was just about to turn his face away, when a beautiful, white hand firmly gripped his face. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were cold and pure, reflecting Ning Yishu's face. She emphasized each word and said, "Of Ning." Ning Yishu felt as if his heart was being pulled out and torn apart. If he hadn't destroyed his spiritual root, he would have been happy to see Bai Weiwei remember everything that had happened between the two of them in the dreamland. But now, he wanted to avoid her so much. In the illusion, he was strong enough to protect her, but in reality, he was worse than trash. But Wei Wei Bai refused to let him lower his head. She was impatient and reached out to grab his wet clothes. Ning Yishu reacted and grabbed her hand. He looked up at her and said in a complicated tone. "Master," Wei Wei Bai said coldly, "are you of Ning? When I was in the secret territory, did I go to the labyrinth of illusions? Did you take me in?" Ning Yishu was most afraid that she would know about this. Because this meant that she knew that he had wanted to kill her. Wei Wei Bai's fingers slowly moved across his eyebrows, down his cheeks, and gently fell on his lips. Her voice became soft. "I had a very long dream. In the dream, you were like an omnipotent master. You grew up with me and protected me." Ning Yishu's body trembled slightly. In the illusion, she was special to him, but he did not dare to think that he could have such a high position in her heart. Wei Wei Bai fell into memory and said softly, "When I was at my worst, you were by my side. When I was in the biggest crisis, you were still by my side. When I was in a mess, you were still by my side." Ning Yishu's expression also became gentle. Bai Weiwei suddenly pinched his chin. "That's why I say you're a jinx. When you're by my side, why am I always unlucky?" Ning Yishu was speechless. Bai Weiwei reached out and pressed him heavily into the water. "So you troublemaker, be obedient and take a bath. Wash off that damn bad luck of yours." Ning Yishu drank several mouthfuls of medicine. The pain was almost unbearable. Suddenly, a gentle and soft spiritual chi flowed through his limbs. The pain disappeared after a while. Bai Weiwei cast a spell and floated in the air. She leaned against the edge of the tub and pressed her hand on his shoulder. She lazily combed his body so that the potion could be better digested in his body. Ning Yishu was pressed into the medicine, and from time to time, he would be pressed down by her to drink a few mouthfuls. He struggled to say, "Master, it's useless. My spiritual root is already ruined and my body is also ruined, so, no amount of medicine could make him normal." Wei Wei Bai coldly said, "You are so long-winded." After saying that, she pressed him into the water again. Over and over again, when the medicine was almost completely digested, she lifted him up and threw him out of the door. "Get lost. Come back tomorrow morning to serve me." Ning Yishu sat on the ground. His wet body was dried by her technique. Because of the medicine, his gray hair began to have some luster. His movements were a bit sluggish as he slowly stood up from the ground. His expression seemed to be a bit absent-minded, but his eyes were no longer lifeless. / Sashu. Com/. Chapter 405. The Great Formation was shaken by countless attacks. The cannon fodder sects in the novel had at least a few hundred people crowding the entrance of Grand Heaven's Mountain. An almighty void refinement cultivator with white hair and a childish face had a cold expression. "Wei Wei Bai, you connived with your traitorous disciple to commit murder and kill my disciple. If you don't kill Ningishu today, I swear to slaughter your sect. Wei Wei Bai's eyes glazed over for a moment. She asked the system, who's his disciple? The system flipped through the novel's settings. It's your good brother, Yu Qin. Good brother, Wei Wei Bai shuddered in disgust. Only then did she remember that Ningishu destroyed Yu Chen's body and soul. With the small one dead, the big one came out to be the main character's obstacle. Shuang novels were all like this. The small one brought out the big one brought out the old one, and the old one brought out his ancestors. In any case, he had to do his best to go against the main character and persevere to give the main character experience and equipment. This was all a routine. Yu Chen's master suddenly formed a flower with his fingers. The flower condensed from spirit energy kept growing bigger until it could cover the entire Grand Heavens Mountain. The ancestral protective formation of Grand Heavens Mountain suddenly shook. Kill Ningishu, and I will spare the lives of everyone in Grand Heavens Mountain. Void refinement cultivators could move the heavens and overturn the seas. They could slaughter thousands of creatures with a raise of their hands. In any case, they were very awesome. Wei Wei Bai felt that her nascent soul cultivator was too pitiful. She was just a small cannon fodder character in the early stages. As soon as she got entangled with Ningishu, all sorts of messy late-stage big bosses came out. The main character was indeed a jinx. Whoever was by his side would be unlucky. Wei Wei Bai knew that the great formation of Grand Heavens Mountain was a protective shield built by generations of ancestors. Even if a void refinement cultivator wanted to break this formation, it would take some time. Thus, she was very assured and walked forward a few steps. Just as she was about to show off, her hand was grabbed by Ningishu. Wei Wei Bai looked back strangely and saw him staring deeply at her. Master, let me out. His expression was calm. He didn't look like he was going to die, but more like he was going out for a stroll. He knew that it was impossible for Wei Wei Bai, who was in the nascent soul stage, to defeat those people outside the door. Moreover, he knew very well that she would not go against so many people for him. Because she had such a selfish personality, but he didn't feel the slightest bit of resentment, and even felt relieved. Only with her personality could she protect herself. He could not protect her. He would rather she be selfish, vicious, and arrogant than compromise and accept her fate for anyone else. Wei Wei Bai sneered, "Are you so eager to die?" Ningishu didn't show a trace of fear in the face of death, but there was a trace of gentleness in his tone. "If I die, will you remember me?" Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows, her eyes filled with anger. "Why would I remember you? If you die, I can get rid of the reputation of taking in a trash disciple. Who will remember you?" Ningishu's smile stiffened for a moment. He seemed a little sad. He opened his mouth a few times, but in the end, he just sighed. "Master, then I'll be leaving." A void refinement stage cultivator was too terrifying. With the addition of the people from the big sects outside, Grand Heavens Mountain didn't have the power to fight. If he didn't cripple his spirit root and had the bloodstained dagger, he could still protect her. But now, he was just a trash. After Ningishu finished speaking, he walked out without hesitation. His body was much weaker than before. The aftermath of the array hit his body, and every step he took was like scraping his flesh. But his footsteps were incomparably firm. He walked to the edge of the array, paused for a moment, and then slowly stepped out. This step was a parting of life and death. At https://www.sashu.com/full text at https://www.sashu.com download text at https://www.sashu.com at https://m sashu com//. Chapter 406. Yu Chen's master glanced at him indifferently and raised his hand. You killed my disciple, so I'll kill you. An eye for an eye, an eye for an eye. This is a common practice in the cultivation world. The flower in his hand suddenly turned into a ray of white light. The white light was like a sharp blade, ruthlessly stabbing towards the chest of Ning Yishu, who had just stepped out of the formation. Ning Yishu didn't dodge. He just stood there calmly. His weak body was as straight as a pine tree, and his handsome face was serene. Many memories of the past flashed through his mind, and all of them were related to Wei Wei Bai. Her viciousness, her occasional fragility, and the helplessness and pain of being trapped by her past in the illusion realm. Finally, it was her smiling face in the morning light. Idiot, you have to come and find me earlier next time. He wouldn't be able to find her in this life or the next. The consequence of having his body and soul destroyed was that he wouldn't even have the chance to reincarnate. Before he died, Ning Yishu finally dared to call out softly, Wei Wei Bai. Idiot, why are you calling me? A crisp voice rang in his ears. Ning Yishu's eyes suddenly widened. A long dress like fluttering feathers glided across the sky, and a familiar fragrance appeared in his nose. He looked up and saw her stepping on the void, walking with the wind. That white light blade was blocked by her. Ning Yishu felt his heart suddenly jump, and his eyes were bloodshot. No, come back. A nascent soul cultivator couldn't resist a void refinement cultivator. He would die. Wei Wei Bai forcibly blocked the fatal attack for him, and her entire body fell from the sky. Ning Yishu's heart and soul were torn apart. He chased after her with all his might, and reached out to grab her falling body. The huge gravity made him unable to bear it, and he fell backward. He fell heavily to the ground and endured all the impact. He didn't dare to let Wei Wei Bai and his arms suffer the slightest bit of harm. When the void refinement stage cultivator saw this, his tone finally turned cold. It seems like Grand Heaven's Mountain sect has sworn to protect Ning Yishu. Then I can only slaughter your entire sect. Wei Wei Bai, who was lying in Ning Yishu's arms, raised her head and couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Her lips were dyed red, and her eyes were filled with ruthlessness. For a moment, her face was so gorgeous that it was dazzling. You ugly old bastard. You can't break through to the void refining stage. You're just a piece of trash who doesn't have many years left to live. How dare you come to my Grand Sky Mountain sect and make a ruckus? You're just like that pretentious disciple of yours. Both of you are asking for death. Going against the main character. If this wasn't courting death, then what was? After Wei Wei Bai finished speaking, she waved her finger and a huge array was formed in the air. This was the key to the Grand Mountain Protective Array. The Grand Mountain Protective Array could protect the Grand Heavens Mountain for thousands of years without any changes. But once they attacked, it would be a suicidal attack. Not to mention void refining stage cultivators, even Deshang stage cultivators would have to weigh their own abilities. When that cultivator saw this, his expression finally changed slightly. He waved his hand and used his magic power to protect himself. Then, he swept away the elites of his sect. Let's go. We can't stay here for long. Wei Wei Bai formed a seal with her fingers. You want to leave? It's not that easy. Suddenly, the world fell silent. A strange light surged out from the center of the Grand Mountain Protective Array. Wei Wei Bai stood up from Ning Yishu's arms. She stretched out her hand and threw him back into the Grand Mountain Protective Array. Ning Yishu lay on the ground in a sorry state. He raised his head and looked outside the array in a daze. Wei Wei Bai had her back to him. She stood in the dazzling light. Her long dress and black hair fluttered in the wind. She was extremely stunning. Everyone's escape route was covered by the light. The Grand Mountain Protective Array started to attack. All the cultivators who came to attack the Grand Heavens Mountain sect died one after another. Screams rang out one after another. Their lives were taken away by the intense light. Chapter 407. The leading Void Refinement Cultivator gritted his teeth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His vitality was greatly damaged, so he used a forbidden technique to break through space and escape. He roared with a ferocious expression, "Wei Wei Bai, I will definitely repay the losses I suffered today. Just wait for me." Wei Wei Bai sneered, her eyes full of arrogance. "If you have the guts, don't run, old turtle." After the Great Array finished attacking the enemy, it gradually quieted down. Wei Wei Bai also turned around and walked back. After a few steps, she finally couldn't take it anymore and spat out a mouthful of blood. The consequence of a nascent soul cultivator forcibly activating the Great Array was to cause great harm to the caster. In addition, Wei Wei Bai damaged her own meridians to not violate her character setting and get close to Ning Yishu. Now it was one disaster after another. Ning Yishu was lying on the ground, his expression difficult to distinguish whether he was happy or angry. When he saw her spitting out blood and stumbling, the intense emotions in his heart finally burst out. He grabbed the ground with both hands, almost scraping them to the point of bleeding. With an unimaginable speed, he got up and rushed in front of her. Just as she was about to fall, he reached out and hugged her. However, his body was weak to begin with. When he knelt on the ground, he didn't feel any pain at all. He just kept reaching out to wipe the blood from Wei Wei Bai's mouth. Wei Wei Bai coughed a few times before lazily leaning her head on his chest. "Why did you save me?" he asked as if he was still in a dream. With Wei Wei Bai's character, how could she risk everything to save him? The Great Array could only be attacked once, and the caster had to pay a huge price. Those escaping enemies would come back again. How could she, a nascent soul cultivator, survive? Ning Yishu's mind was full of confused doubts. His eyes reddened and he felt bitter. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be in a trance. "I don't know either." The tears in Ning Yishu's eyes finally fell. He gritted his teeth and said fiercely, "How can you not know? Do you want to force me to death?" She was cold and hot to him, making him crazy and desperate. When he was about to sacrifice himself, this woman abandoned everything to save him. She was so capricious, so vicious and affectionate. She forced him to love her to the point that he couldn't control himself. Bai Weiwei sneered, "What's wrong? You're dissatisfied with saving you. Do you want me to apologize to you? Too embarrassed to come and save you." She had to be so vicious even when she was trying to save someone. Ning Yishu couldn't help but laugh. She still had this temperament, but he couldn't stop his tears from flowing. He was crying and laughing, he looked very embarrassed. "You really don't save me," he said softly as he picked her up and walked back. He was very greedy. If she gave him a little bit of hope, he would want to be tied to her forever. She had saved him, and he didn't want to let her go for the rest of his life. Wei Wei Bai leaned in his arms and quietly closed her eyes. She quietly communicated with the system. "What should I do if he keeps crying? Who said that men don't cry easily? He's crying like a tortured little boy." The system flipped through the original novel and sighed. "If I were Ning Yishu, I'd cry worse than him." Wei Wei Bai was speechless. The system said, "You're a good male lead, yet you've survived until now. You don't have any abilities, you don't have any girls, and you don't even have any brothers. Don't you think it's bad?" Wei Wei Bai was speechless. "Don't you still have me? The system paused for a moment before saying, "With you, wouldn't it be worse?" By Wei Wei. At the /crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download Transmigration system, Adonis, come here and read this on your phone, https://m. Sashu. Calm. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 98. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. /transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 409. Ning Yishu held Wei Wei Bai's hand and arrived in front of the formation they used last time. They activated the simple dual cultivation formation that hadn't been modified in any way. Ning Yishu was the first to speak. I, Ning Yishu, am willing to be with Wei Wei Bai for eternity. With heaven and earth as the medium, with all living things as witnesses, we will be together for eternity. Wei Wei Bai didn't want to speak too much, so she directly said, Wei Wei Bai, agree. After saying that, the formation activated and imprinted a faint imprint on both of their souls. Without Ning Yishu's tyrannical modification, this imprint could easily be erased, and it could also easily break the dual cultivation partnership. When the imprint was imprinted on their souls, Ning Yishu suddenly said gently, Wei Wei, I love you. Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a moment, then she couldn't help but smile. Let's go, I'll give you a wedding gift. Although he didn't hear her reply, Ning Yishu didn't feel sad at all. The fact that she agreed to marry him, with her personality, was the best answer. Wei Wei Bai led him into the pill refining room, where the huge pill furnace had already started to burn. Ning Yishu didn't understand what was going on. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, the meridians in my body are very difficult to heal. Ning Yishu obviously knew how broken her meridians were, especially when she blocked a blow from a void-tempering cultivator and activated the Great Mountain Protecting Formation when she saved him. She was simply forcing him to his death. Ning Yishu's heart was full of pity. I will definitely think of a way to save you. Wei Wei Bai smiled happily. That's good, I'm still a bit embarrassed to say it. Didn't you say that you still have some strength left in your body? Now that my alchemy furnace is ready, you can go in and refine it. Refine your physical strength into medicinal pills for me to nourish my body. Ning Yishu did not respond. He stood there in a daze for a while. Then, he asked softly, you married me just for this? Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows. You can't say that. I happen to like you a little, so I'm kind enough to fulfill your wish before you die so that you can die happy. The light in Ning Yishu's eyes dimmed. He forced a smile, and his body seemed to have lost all strength. If it's what you want, I'll give it to you. Moreover, she liked him just a little bit. What else was there for him to be dissatisfied with? She had always been like this. He should have known. Ning Yishu walked in front of the pill furnace, his footsteps unsteady, almost unable to stand steadily. Wei Wei Bai turned a blind eye to him. She waved her hand to open the door to the pill furnace and pushed him inside. Ning Yishu fell into the pill furnace. Before he was swallowed by the flames, he suddenly used all his strength to reach out, wanting to touch her one last time. But Wei Wei Bai easily shook off his outstretched hand and expressionlessly closed the door. She was so heartless that she didn't even have the patience to deal with him one last time. It was only when the flames licked his body that he felt the pain. His heart ached so much that it covered the sky and covered the earth. Wei Wei Bai stood outside the pill furnace. She heard the sound of the favorability dropping. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 95. Ning Yishu truly loved her. After being sent to hell by her so many times, the favorability only dropped this much. The system couldn't help but remind her, the male lead isn't prepared to break out of the pill furnace. He doesn't want to live anymore, he only wants to die. Wei Bai, he won't die. Later, he'll cry and beg to open the pill furnace to escape. After saying this, she waved her hand. Green flames lit up in the pill furnace room. This was the sacrificial fire. Chapter 410. In the alchemy room, there was a huge alchemy furnace in the middle. Below the furnace was a circular formation. The formation was for Ning Yishu to reconstruct his spirit root. Reconstructing the spirit root required fuel. Wei Bai's 1,000-year lifespan was the fuel. She sat cross-legged outside the alchemy furnace, the green flame burning on the formation. She did not feel pain, because the flame burned nothing but her lifespan. A 1,000-year lifespan was nothing to Wei Bai, because she could only live for 16 months at most, so she treated it as waste material. She looked at the alchemy furnace, letting Ning Yishu roar and stomp in it, but she was not moved at all. She knew that her body in this world was ruined by herself, so she sacrificed her nascent soul lifespan to Ning Yishu to reconstruct his spirit root. She would not be able to hold on for more than a few hours. Therefore, the remaining 5 favorability points, as well as the fucking missions of skinning, cutting off flesh, and sacrificing souls, had to be completed together. Wei Bai said, "I feel so busy." A 16-month mission was squeezed into 3 months. She was so tired. The system said, "Hee hee." Wei Bai thought, this fucking system, what does that hee hee mean? Shouldn't a normal system be busy comforting its host? The system said, hurry up and finish it. Give the male lead a quick death. The male lead in this world was so miserable that it started to doubt life. Wei Bai said, if I didn't know better, I would have thought that you were Ning Yishu's system. The system was silent for a moment. If only I were, Wei Bai, how much did the system dislike her? Wei Bai counted with her fingers how much of her lifespan had been burned. When it was almost time, she adjusted her expression and tried to calm her voice. She was calm with suppressed sadness. She was awe-inspiring with a sense of timidity and fear. She was cold and heartless with deep affection. Ah Ning. Her voice sounded calmly. Ning Yishu was inside the pill furnace. His hands, which were pounding the walls of the pill furnace, were already badly mangled. When he heard Wei Bai's voice, he trembled violently and his eyes turned red. Master, please let me out. I beg you. This voice wept blood and despair, filled with madness at the end of the road. Her lifespan had turned into fuel, constantly reshaping his body. Every time his meridians were repaired, every time spirit chi entered his body. They were all terrified. This was her life. If he was getting better, it meant that she was getting weaker. Outside the pill furnace, Bai Weiwei's lips curved into a smile. Do you know that the things in the illusion are all condensed from my past memories? Ning Yishu's fingers left deep blood marks on the walls of the furnace. His voice trembled. I know. Don't continue. Don't continue. With every breath that passed, several years of her lifespan would disappear. Wei Bai turned a deaf ear. I had a miserable childhood. My family was all killed. I went to Grand Heaven's Mountain. I was stupid and useless. I was bullied. Ning Yishu looked at his bloody hands and could only helplessly be trapped in the pill furnace. Her voice was neither fast nor slow. It's been 100 years. I've almost forgotten what happened in the past. But I remember that when I almost died in the woodshed, a mysterious senior saved me. He looked ordinary, but he could avoid everyone to save me. Isn't this strange? When Ning Yishu heard this, he frowned fiercely. Wasn't this what they had experienced in the illusion? But Wei Wei Bai meant that it was her real experience. Full text //. Download. Chapter 411. Wei Wei Bai calmly continued, afterwards, my master wanted to possess my body and I had no way of resisting. Then, he appeared once again to save me. At that time, I felt that this man was the one I wanted and that I liked him. Ning Yishu's frantic hammering of the pill furnace froze as a look of shock flashed through his eyes. Of course, after that, he never appeared again. I am a cold-hearted person and in just a few years, I almost forgot all about him. When Wei Wei Bai said this, the calm in her voice finally cracked and became incomparably sorrowful. She laughed at herself. I also fulfilled my wish. I reached nascent soul in 100 years and the entire Grand Heavens Mountain is my grand disciple. I even took in a disappointing disciple. Ning Yishu opened his mouth several times, but was unable to shout out anything. The blood-mark long sword standing in the pill furnace was refined by Wei Wei Bai's lifespan. It had already turned into a golden dragon and began to revolve around Ning Yishu. Once the golden dragon entered Ning Yishu's body, he would be able to restore his spiritual roots. However, he did not feel happy at all. Only endless cold despair surrounded him. Wei Wei Bai said, that disciple is really disappointing. I saw the difference in his body long ago. For someone like me who is afraid of trouble, I would not accept such a disciple. Ning Yishu's voice weakened as he pleaded, I know I'm a cripple and I'm useless, so don't save me. Wei Wei Bai sneered, so you still know you're a cripple. If you didn't look so similar to him, I would have already killed you. Ning Yishu could not understand her words. You look exactly like the senior who saved me. Ning Yishu could not help but repeat, exactly the same. Wei Wei Bai said, I knew you weren't him, but sometimes I would run to your bedside and stare at you in the middle of the night. There was one time when you were seriously injured. When I saw you rolling around in pain, I couldn't help but feed you medicine. Ning Yishu finally remembered. At that time, he had been muddle-headed due to his illness. He had reached out to tear off a piece of her skirt and smelled a familiar fragrance. That was why he started to suspect that she was the one who had saved him and suddenly barged into her room for the first time. That was the first time he had received help from someone who was kind to him in Grand Heavens Mountain. It turned out that the person who was tormenting him was the same person who was giving him kindness. Wei Wei Bai narrowed her eyes at the green flames and listened to the countdown to her lifespan. When you extracted your spiritual root to save me, I suddenly remembered what happened in the illusory realm. The labyrinth of illusions might have the power to distort time and space. That's why you didn't fall into the labyrinth of illusions. Instead, you traveled back in time and saved me. Wei Wei Bai watched as the green flames slowly extinguished. However, the pill furnace emitted a dazzling golden light. The burning of 1,000 years of lifespan allowed Ning Yishu, who was in the pill furnace, to temper a heavenly soul spiritual root. Wei Wei Bai walked to the pill furnace and listened to the man inside struggling with all his might. Ning, it's been 100 years, but I haven't forgotten you for a single moment. She reached out her hand and placed it on the pill furnace door. But I never thought that you would be the Ning who accompanied me through the most desperate days 100 years ago, and that I would torture and beat you in every possible way. Wei Wei Bai finally couldn't suppress the trembling in her voice. So I've been tormenting the man I love. Inside the pill furnace, Ning Yishu suddenly stopped all his movements. He stood there covered in wounds, and for a moment, he actually forgot to stop the golden dragon from approaching him. Only her words echoed in his mind. The man I love. Chapter 412. His despairing heart was filled with gentle joy, and this joy was filled with endless sorrow. The alchemy furnace rumbled, and a dragon entered Ningishu's body. Spirit root reconstruction. Wei Wei Bai shook violently, and fell to the ground. Then she heard the system's notification. Ding, favorability is at 97. 98, the system said, you can actually use this scenario twice. Damn, it was bad enough that she randomly made up her own identity, but she could still use such a lousy story in an illusion. She could even create a lover for 100 years. The host was too good at playing, it had to admit defeat. Wei Wei Bai said helplessly, the original owner tortured Ningishu to death, that sadistic demon. I guess no matter how much Ningishu loved me, he would still have some resentment in his heart. 100% love. It did not allow any impurities. So I could only tell him that I beat him, abused him, and kicked him because he looked exactly like the man I loved. In the end, the man she loved was still him. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Ningishu would definitely be overjoyed. There would be no resentment left. The system said, this is too lame, too old-fashioned. Wei Wei Bai suddenly saw that her black hair had turned white. She was silent for a moment. I'm old. The system said, your hair is as white as snow, faint wrinkles are crawling up your forehead, and the touch of time has created countless wrinkles on your face. You're already at the end of your life, you're an old woman around 100 years old, so don't talk about white hair, even a sneeze would cause you to leak urine. Leak urine, Wei Wei Bai covered her face in despair. No, I can't believe I'm old. The system said earnestly, who isn't old? You're old sooner or later, you're going to die anyway. Don't worry about it, finish the mission, and let's pack up and go back. Wei Wei Bai refused, I'm not old no matter who's old, I'll always be a young and beautiful fairy. The system fell silent. Who the hell was this young and beautiful fairy? It refused to have such a lowly fairy as its host. Wei Wei Bai reached out and touched her own face. It was still smooth, but when she touched the corner of her eyes, she actually found a faint eyeline. She staggered a few steps and suddenly dashed out. The system cursed, wait a minute, the male lead is still in the furnace, at least open a door and let him out. Otherwise, how are you going to complete your mission? Wei Wei Bai was going crazy. I don't have much time left. I only have about 10 minutes left. I estimate that in less than a few minutes, my face will become wrinkled like an orange peel. If Ningishu sees me like this, his 98 favorability will probably drop to -98. The system said, true love is not afraid of age difference. Wei Wei Bai, can you love someone who's old enough to be your grandmother? The system thought of a white-haired, toothless, trembling, and urinating tyrant standing in front of it. It was speechless. The host was right, it couldn't love her. Wei Wei Bai covered her face and whimpered, I feel like our family is going to die, I don't have the face to attack him. The system was about to shout a few words of encouragement when a terrifying loud noise came from behind them. Yi Sui and Tong Yi turned around at the same time and saw that the entire furnace had exploded. The golden light mixed with the ominous red blood shadow surged into a bowl. Wei Wei Bai's face turned serious. Tong Yi, where's the nearest cliff? The system opened the map and gave her directions. The nearest one is 10 minutes away from here. Although it's a cliff, it's not very high. Quick. Chapter 413. Wei Wei Bai nodded and reached out to touch her face, trying to pull herself together. So what if she's old? Maybe Ningishu has a heavy taste and likes her like this. The pill furnace was blasted open by a terrifying force, and the flames and dust mixed together. Ningishu bent over in the flames, as if he was in pain. His whole body trembled as he kept muttering, "Master, Master, don't leave me behind." Suddenly, he raised his head, and a pair of black eyes were half bright and half dark, with a golden light desperately flowing in them. There was no warmth, only a terrifying dark and evil aura. He saw Wei Wei Bai outside the flames. She was standing not far away, her black hair had already turned white, her pale white face was devoid of blood, and faint wrinkles began to appear at the corners of her beautiful eyes. She used all of her lifespan to shape his spirit root. A person who loved to look beautiful was now beginning to age. Ning Yishu's expression twisted, and he felt even more heartache for those wrinkles on his face than she did. Wei Wei Bai tiredly smiled at him. "All right, you help me draw out my spirit root, and I'll return it to you. From now on, we don't owe each other anything." After saying that, she used the last of her magic power to make herself disappear. Ning Yishu's pupils contracted, and he stumbled forward. The power in his body was so out of control that it felt like it was about to explode. The familiar spiritual power had all returned, and he was no longer a waste. But he would rather be a waste. As long as she didn't dislike him, he could be a waste that only belonged to her for the rest of his life. Ning Yishu's expression turned sinister, and his fingers quickly formed a formation in the air. "Find her for me." The formation's power quickly revolved, and a strange power appeared in the air, constantly moving away. That was the direction Wei Wei Bai left in. Ning Yishu quickly rushed over. He wouldn't let her leave. How could she not want him like this? Wei Wei Bai finally managed to climb to the edge of the cliff, and she really had to crawl. Her body couldn't take it. She was beginning to collapse. Her face was still okay. She had bought a beauty mask from the system, so she could keep her beauty. Wei Wei Bai managed to grab hold of a rock on the edge of the cliff and leaned against it to stand up straight. The wind on the cliff was strong and cold. She really wanted to sneeze. However, when she thought of the stubborn illness of the elderly, she stiffened and held back her sneeze, not daring to open her mouth. It was too difficult to hold it in. His eyes were red and tears flowed from his eyes. When Ning Yishu arrived, he saw Wei Wei Bai with a head full of white hair, looking down the cliff with tears in her eyes. Was she going to commit suicide? Ning Yishu reflexively held his breath, not daring to let her discover him. Step by step, he suddenly pounced on her. Only then did Wei Wei Bai react. At this moment, it was Bai Weiwei's most difficult counterattack. She actually lifted her foot and unhesitatingly kicked Ning Yishu, who was flying towards her, even though her body was so weak. Of course, this kick was nothing to Ning Yishu, but if he dodged, the huge momentum would cause Wei Wei Bai to fall off the cliff. Thus, he chose to let her kick him, and because he was too fast, he fell off the cliff. Wei Wei Bai, this meant that the mission of climbing the cliff was completed, although it was a surprise. There was still the scenario of skinning and cutting off the flesh, as well as sacrificing the soul. However, Wei Wei Bai felt that she couldn't take it anymore. She fell to the ground and her vision was gray. Did she have presbyopia? Ning Yishu stopped in the middle of the cliff and stepped on the void to fly up again. He saw her sitting on the ground with empty eyes. Slash. Chapter 4:14. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt someone hugging her. Then Ning Yishu's hoarse voice rang out, "Wei Wei. I will save you." There was no end to saving and saving, right? Wei Wei Bai refused to repeat such an old and tired joke. She reached out and firmly pinched his face. She couldn't see clearly as long as she had a mouth to speak. "Do you have a knife?" Ning Yishu blankly looked at her and repeated like a parrot, "Knife?" Wei Wei Bai coughed and immediately held back. She said with difficulty, "I once cultivated an evil technique from the demon realm." I used up my lifespan, so if I want to forcibly extend my life, I can only turn into a demon. Ning Yishu was already unable to think carefully. His fingers gently touched the wrinkles that were beginning to appear on her face. He wished he could erase those wrinkles. Give me a knife. Wei Wei Bai suddenly ordered. Ning Yishu's fingers shook and he used his spiritual power to form a small knife. Wei Wei Bai reached out and grabbed it. She suddenly said with some grievance, I don't have the strength, I can't hold it. Ning Yishu immediately grabbed her hand in panic. Okay, Wei Wei, I'll hold it for you. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but smile, although her face had already begun to show the wrinkles of age. In his eyes, she was still beautiful. But her actions made him feel at a loss. That knife fell on her chest and cut through the red wedding dress. The tip of the knife broke through the skin. Blood gushed out. Ning Yishu finally exploded. He angrily shouted, Wei Wei Bai, what are you doing? Wei Wei Bai weakly said, this cultivation technique is evil. To turn into a demon, you need my flesh. Although it was skinning and cutting the flesh, because the side mission was too simple, she had just checked with the system. The knife only needed to cut the skin and pierce the flesh to complete the mission. Ning Yishu's eyes reddened. Can't you ask me? Am I willing to reconstruct my spirit root? If he regained his strength, she would have to pay with her life. He would rather have died under her torture in the first place. Wei Wei Bai forced a sneer. What does it have to do with me whether you're willing or not? I am willing. That is the most important thing. His selfishness was truly hateful. However, he loved her so much that he was about to break down. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 99. Wei Wei Bai sighed softly. Remember, my soul will leave my body later. Restrain my soul for a while and then release it. I will return to my body and be resurrected. These words were calm and firm. It was as if he could really be resurrected. Ning Yishu couldn't believe it either. Really? Wei Wei Bai finally revealed a sweet and gentle smile. Yo, idiot, you still don't believe me. How can such a selfish person like me sacrifice so much? I will definitely survive. Ning Yishu was like a person in despair who saw a ray of light. His lips and tongue trembled. Really? Wei Wei Bai slowly closed her eyes. She softly hummed. Ning Yishu finally said, all right, you have to come back to life. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 100. Side mission, soul sacrifice refinement, countdown to completion. Wei Wei Bai was also gambling. Although it was a soul sacrifice refinement, the time given by the system was very short. As long as Ning Yishu used a spell to restrain her soul, it would count as a soul sacrifice. Right, that old pervert in menopause also knew about this side mission. It was insanely difficult. Therefore, it was just a formality. But what she was gambling on was that Ning Yishu wouldn't be such a waste that he couldn't even catch her soul. After Wei Wei Bai closed her eyes, Ning Yishu felt her body soften. She was peacefully held in his arms. It was as if she had fallen asleep. But Ning Yishu knew that this wasn't sleeping, but death. Chapter 4:15. His eyes were extremely bright, and all the strength in his body surged out, forming an array to capture the soul. On her soul, there was a faint mark of being husband and wife with him. With this mark, he would definitely be able to find her. Suddenly, not far from the array, a light appeared. It was Wei Wei Bai's soul, a white and misty ball. Ning Yishu's heart, which had been stretched to the limit, suddenly relaxed. His eyes flashed with ecstasy. She didn't lie to him. Her soul was still there. She was still alive. Ning Yishu carefully reached out and held her soul. He looked carefully and saw a small person curled up in the white light, like a baby in its mother's womb. That small body and the quiet sleeping face were all Wei Bai's. Cute and weak. Ning Yishu didn't even dare to move his fingers. He restrained her soul for a short while. Then, he began to withdraw from the array, worried that the power of the array would hurt her soul. After all, she looked so fragile. Ning Yishu revealed a surprised smile. After the array was withdrawn, he let go of his hand. The white, misty soul gradually disappeared into thin air. But he didn't hear a calm voice coming from the void. Ding, the host's side quest is completed. Favorability is full. Preparing to leave this plane. Countdown to the opening of the Xianxia High Energy World Passage, successful escape. Ning Yishu thought that when he let go, Wei Bai would wake up. Because she said that this was an evil technique for those who were possessed. It could bring people back from the dead. To him, it didn't matter if she was possessed or not, as long as she could survive. He could slaughter the world. Ning Yishu hugged her body and sat on the cliff in a daze. It seemed to have been a long time. Ning Yishu used his spiritual power to protect the corpse in his arms. He kept the corpse from rotting. But the corpse was still a corpse. She hadn't come back yet. Why didn't he come back? Ning Yishu felt that he had not waited long enough. He did not dare to leave, for fear that Wei Bai's soul would not be able to find its way. His body no longer needed to eat, nor did he feel thirsty. He didn't even feel tired. Therefore, he could still wait. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 1 month, 2 months, 1 year, 10 years, Master, why aren't you back yet? He had waited for her for a long time. Wei Bai heard a familiar voice. Host has completed the mission, the difficulty level has increased. You have received 40 days of life, a total of 47 days of life. When she heard this, the corners of her mouth had yet to curl up into a smile. A series of demerit reminders had arrived. Ding, painkiller pill for 4 days. 5 days to fill in the settings and 1 day to activate the illusion. 7 days of brain damage. 1 beauty mask and 15 system masks for 3 days. Congratulations, you have 27 life points remaining. For the first time, Wei Bai could finally wake up with a smile. The system suddenly said, you need to stay calm. Wei Bai was in a good mood, I'm very calm. Wei Bai, who had been abused by her life points, really felt that she was very good. She opened her eyes and a cold handsome face appeared above her. Yi Yuxuan. Wei Bai reflexively trembled, her life points. Seeing this unlucky person, she couldn't wait to leave as soon as possible. Yi Yuxuan's expression was very strange, and even stranger. They were so close, but the system did not remind her that her life points were being taken away by him. Wei Bai was just about to speak. Yi Yuxuan's handsome face suddenly became ferocious, a golden light flashed in his eyes. Why? He hysterically reached out his hand and grabbed her neck. I've been waiting for you, why didn't you come back? Yi Yuxuan's eyes were full of resentment and despair, but also full of twisted sadness and pain. It was as if he was going to cry. / Chapter 4:16. It was as if he was going to cry. He had waited for too long. 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years. He had waited for 1,000 years. The Cultivation Master's Blackened Disciple sequel. At first, Ning Yishu thought that the resurrection would take time. He didn't dare to leave and didn't dare to move her body easily. He could only silently use his spiritual power to comb through her meridians and maintain her appearance before she left. Sometimes, when he saw a few more wrinkles on Wei Wei Bai's face, he couldn't help but use his gentle spiritual power to smooth them out. Little by little, he kept her body in its youngest and most beautiful state. When his master came back and saw that she was so young and beautiful, he would definitely be very happy. She had always been like this, superficial and fond of beautiful things. He knew that she liked to be praised for her beauty. "You're so beautiful that the sun and moon lose their light. In this world, no one can surpass your beauty. Women are ugly, men are mud ball dregs, who can compare to a finger of yours. Master, when will you come back?" He kept talking to her, talking to himself. He hoped that one day, she would open her eyes and kick him angrily. Or scold him again. He would definitely be overjoyed. But he waited for a long time, wind and rain, sun and sun, autumn leaves and winter snow. The cycle of the seasons. She was still a corpse. Ning Yishu began to panic and go crazy. The terrifying thought in his heart that he had never dared to face finally appeared. Wei Wei Bai couldn't be resurrected at all. He had a retentive memory, and he had read many ancient books. He took away the magic treasures and secret books of the mystic realm for 10,000 years. There were so many things, so many books, but there was no way to resurrect like Wei Wei Bai said. He knew very well that this was not the process of becoming a demon. But because she was going to die, he could only believe what she said and didn't dare to disobey. Ning Yishu desperately suppressed the uneasiness in his heart. He began to use his spiritual power to comb through Wei Wei Bai's meridians again. "No, you just need some time. I can wait." Just as he finished speaking, he heard a low growl coming from the void. "Little thief Ning Yishu, I'm here to take your dog life today." Ning Yishu looked up expressionlessly. Then, he saw countless cultivators flying over on their swords from the top of the cliff. The leader was actually Yu Chen's master, who was beaten away by Wei Wei Bai. It was said that the attack of the spirit formation had severely injured him and forced him to go into seclusion. Now that he had come out of seclusion, this old turtle had broken through from the void tempering stage to the body integration stage. As soon as he came out of seclusion, he gathered a group of disciples and grand disciples and swore to kill Ning Yishu and Wei Wei Bai. The old turtle floated like an immortal and sat on a huge flower. He said coldly, "I heard that the bitch Wei Wei Bai is dead. She's lucky that I don't have to refine her soul and suffer for eternity." Ning Yishu was indifferent at first. Hearing this, he suddenly raised his eyes, which were full of murderous intent. "Who did you say is dead?" The old turtle said coldly, "You're holding a corpse yourself. Who are you talking about? Wei Wei Bai's disciple is not only a loser, but also a fool." As soon as he said this, everyone burst into laughter. Ning Yishu ignored the insult and retorted fiercely, "My master will be resurrected. She will come back." The old turtle was certain. "Come back? How will she come back? Her soul has disappeared, and her corpse is lifeless. And a lifeless corpse couldn't contain any soul. Not even the soul of the person. Is at https://www.sashu.com// Chapter 417. Even her own soul couldn't do it. Ning Yishu also understood this logic, but he didn't want to wake up, nor did he want to believe it. The old turtle snorted. "If you are sure that her soul can return to life, why don't you dare to make a soul condensing array? The soul condensing array will tell you if her soul is still there." This was common knowledge in the cultivation world that all foundation establishment cultivators knew. But Ning Yishu didn't dare to make it. He reached out and hugged Wei Wei Bai's body tightly, his eyes bloodshot. "He didn't dare," the old turtle sneered. "You can't even make a soul condensing array. I'll make one for you. With that said, a simple soul-condensing array appeared under Ning Yishu. The array circulated a few times and suddenly dimmed. Ning Yishu stared at the soul-condensing array in a daze. There was no reaction. A corpse without a soul wouldn't make it react. Seeing that Ning Yishu didn't react, the old turtle snorted. You're lying to yourself. Killing a person like you is simply dirtying my hands. Then, he picked up a flower with his fingers. The flower shone brightly and turned into thousands of flower swords in the blink of an eye. The flower swords suddenly pierced into Ning Yishu's body. Ning Yishu hugged Wei Wei Bai indifferently. The flower swords fell, but he didn't dodge. The old turtle saw his flower swords blast the cliff into pieces. He sneered. You're just an ant. With that said, he was about to leave. In the sword light, a heart-wrenching roar suddenly came, and a terrifying golden spiritual energy shattered all the attacks. Ning Yishu hugged Wei Wei Bai and stood in the surging golden spiritual energy. His eyes were stained by the golden light, and he was completely crazy. The spiritual energy shook heaven and earth. I want all of you to die. With a simple sentence, the heavenly soul shook the foundation of the entire plane, and all the creatures in front of him were turned into dust. Ning Yishu killed everyone, but he didn't react at all. He carefully carried Wei Wei Bai on his back. Master, I think you're lost. If you can't come back, I'll go find you. He searched. 200 years passed. He had searched the entire cultivation world upside down. There was no imprint of her soul. He was at a loss for 100 years and suddenly wondered if soar. Therefore, he began to cultivate. When he was tired, he would lean against the ice coffin that protected the corpse and fall asleep. 400 years later, he broke through the form synthesis stage and reached the great vehicle stage. After another 300 years, he began to transcend tribulation soar. Fearing that the lightning tribulation would destroy Bai Weiwei's body, he carried the entire ice coffin on his back. That was why the lightning tribulation struck his body, and not a single one of them could touch his ice coffin. When he successfully ascended and stepped onto the stairway to heaven, he suddenly saw the imprint of her soul. No one could break through the other plane. Ning Yishu gave up his chance to soar almost instantly. He rushed into the path of that plane. Master, the strong repulsive force melted his body piece by piece. He turned into a skeleton. The skeleton also melted. Only his soul was left. And Wei Wei Bai's faint soul imprint finally became more and more obvious. Ning Yishu cried and laughed at the same time. His soul gradually shattered. In the end, only a fragment of his soul was left. It was an unwilling obsession. It was the purest love. It broke through the plane wall that no one could break through and rushed to the world where she was. This pure unwillingness and fanatical love fell into Yi Yuxuan's body. Yi Yuxuan, no, Ning Yishu woke up. // Chapter 418. Then came Qin Qiu's voice, he's very good, I guarantee that he's a well-rounded young man. Just give him another chance. Bai Changyan said coldly, a good young man actually did that to my daughter, and even Wei Wei said that she wants to cancel the engagement. Wei Wei Bai heard her father's voice. She really couldn't take off her underwear. She was just about to put on her clothes again when her vision turned black. System, what's wrong with me? System, what misunderstanding do you have about your trashy physical fitness? Running and jumping, she basically lived on liquid food and glucose for 3 days. Hypoglycemia. Wei Wei Bai thought that she would fall on the bathroom floor. But she was embraced by a warm embrace. Wei Wei, you are. She didn't finish this sentence before she fainted. When she lost consciousness, the the system activated the newbie gift package. Then it dragged her to the next plane. The system looked back and saw Yi Yuxuan holding Wei Wei Bai and asked, "You're her, right? The person who always appears in my dreams." The system sighed tiredly, then turned around and followed Wei Wei Bai to the next plane without hesitation. Qin Qiu was still trying to persuade Bai Changyan. Mei Yuxuan, handsome, right? His work attitude is first class. Although his family background is good, he never bullies others. Mei Yuxuan, he's just a little shy. He never messes around, and he's still a virgin after so long. Mei Yuxuan, in fact, is very pure, pure, and pure. He's the three pure men. Mei Yuxuan, Bai Changyan felt like there were 10,000 flies flying around him. Qin Qiu was still praising his own family's child. The two people just walked to the door of the girls' bathroom and saw that the door was open. They accidentally glanced inside. Then they saw Yi Yuxuan holding Wei Wei Bai. One had his head down affectionately, the other's clothes were messy. Bai Changyan was stunned. He took 2 steps forward. He finally saw that the person in Yi Yuxuan's arms was his daughter. What was even more frightening was that his daughter's clothes were undone, revealing a large portion of her fair shoulders. It was like being struck by lightning. Bai Changyan's mind went blank. Yi Yuxuan, this pervert, actually put his daughter in the ladies' room. Then he took off his daughter's clothes. What was he doing? Beast, let go of my daughter. I'll fight it out with you. Old Man Bai had a tragic look on his face as he rushed straight into the washroom. Seeing this, Qin Qiu immediately hugged Bai Changyan. Uncle Bai, why can't we talk nicely? Don't be angry. Be careful of high blood pressure. When Yi Yuxuan saw that someone was coming, she immediately turned around. After blocking everyone's view, he carefully helped Wei Wei Bai put on her clothes. Button by button, button by button. His attitude was focused and gentle. At the door, Qin Qiu was holding Bai Changyan. Let go of me, you little bastard, I'm going to kill him. Qin Qiu begged for mercy. No, this is a misunderstanding, it must be a misunderstanding. Father Bai, fuck your misunderstanding, I'm going to die with you. Yi Yuxuan turned a blind eye to the fierce conflict of others. When he buttoned her clothes back, his fingers accidentally slipped over her white skin. The delicate touch made him feel like he was electrocuted. Coupled with the impact just now, he felt that his nose was a little hot. Yi Yuxuan reached out and touched it. Unexpectedly, he had a nosebleed. Father Bai looked up with difficulty and saw in the mirror that pervert Yi was actually having a nosebleed at his daughter. He was so excited that he suddenly couldn't breathe. Qin Qiu noticed that something was wrong and he looked up. Bai Changyan was so excited that he fainted. Qin Qiu was shocked. Fuck, this is going to anger Bai Changyan to death. It would be strange if Wei Wei Bai didn't kill their whole family in the future. He immediately carried Bai Changyan. Yi Yuxuan, this is your father-in-law, quickly help save him. Yi Yuxuan carried Wei Wei Bai and indifferently walked over. He passed by Qin Qiu, his eyes were terrifyingly light. Well, quickly go save him. After that, he carried Wei Wei Bai and left. Qin Qiu, is this your father-in-law or my father-in-law? Yi Yuxuan, you bastard, you should be alone for the rest of your life. /collection below to record this reading record. Chapter 419. He could already hear the salivating and gulping sounds of the wraiths standing silently behind him as they surged forward. When Wei Wei Bai heard his words, she seemed to believe him. The tears in her eyes fell with a pitter-patter. The tears fell on Ji Yongchuan's hand. This trace of coldness actually made his fingers hurt. It relieved a lot. She sobbed and said, "No, uncle wouldn't harm me." Ji Yongchuan's eyes flashed with ridicule. "If he didn't harm you, why would he put you in the cemetery?" Wei Weibai was at a loss, as if she didn't know how to explain. She could only answer, "There must be a reason I don't know, I'll go back and ask him." "Idiot!" Ji Yongchuan sneered in his heart. He said softly, "Okay, when the clothes are undone, I'll accompany you to find your uncle." Wei Weibai looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You're so nice, I'm Wei Weibai, what about you?" Ji Yongchuan was silent for a moment, and then he introduced himself, "I'm called Ji Yongchuan." When ghosts and humans exchanged names, it meant that there was a bond. But she was going to die soon, so this bond was nothing. Ji Yongchuan had already undone most of her clothes. Under the red wedding dress, her exquisite and slender figure was faintly discernible. His movements were a bit slow, and his eyes were a bit shaky. The female ghost had seen so many things, but this was the first time she saw a human girl's body. In the end, he was born in nothingness, and it was only a few years ago that he truly gained consciousness. Wei Weibai could be considered the first human girl he had come into contact with. She was different from all kinds of coquettish and dirty female ghosts. The scent on her body was unbelievably fresh and sweet. No wonder she could attract so many ghosts waiting behind him. Wei Weibai suddenly reached out and softly placed her hand on the back of his hand. Under the back of his hand, there were dozens of little ghosts struggling and screaming. Because they had to resist the attack of the wedding dress. Ji Yongchuan fiercely paused, her pat almost made the ghosts in his hand escape. He looked up coldly and tried to suppress the coldness in his voice. "You can move now." Wei Weibai's face turned red. She tried to avoid his gaze. "I can barely move after you take off my clothes, so, can I take them off myself?" Under her wedding dress, she was only wearing a thin nightgown. It was natural for her to be shy. Ji Yongchuan paused for a moment before slowly retracting his hand. "All right, take it off yourself," Wei Weibai said, "then turn around." Ji Yongchuan clenched his fists tightly, and a few of the ghosts in his hands were crushed to death. Then, he slowly turned around and said, "Take it off." "I won't look." Wei Weibai shyly replied, "Thank you, little brother." The system's balls hurt. It gritted its teeth and said, "Can you not be so mushy?" Wei Weibai, "My mind is blank." Wei Weibai said, "Every time I think about how there are ghosts everywhere, and Ji Yongchuan is also a ghost, I feel chills all over my body and my scalp tingle." Wei Weibai said, "That's why I can't maintain a high standard of performance. I can only be myself." The system said, "Be yourself." Wei Weibai said, "Yes. My heart is pure and shy. That's the effect of my instincts." The system thought, every time the system thought that the host's face was thick enough, the host would cross its bottom line again. Pure and shy. Does the host have some serious misunderstanding of these two words? Ji Yongchuan suddenly said, "Are you done? We have to leave quickly." Time was almost up. Ji Yongchuan's eyes turned colder. Wei Weibai said, "Just a little more and I can take it off." It was too late. Time was almost up. Ji Yongchuan suddenly made a gesture to the ghosts beside him. The ghosts with green faces and fangs bowed their heads respectfully. Then, they obeyed his order and suddenly rushed over. Ji Yongchuan's expression changed. He shouted in fear, "There are so many ghosts. Come out quickly. We have to run quickly." He suddenly threw himself onto the coffin. His whole body was burned by the talisman. His expression was pained. Behind him, the ghosts grabbed him with their hands. "Little brother." Wei Weibai's terrified voice sounded. Ji Yongchuan screamed as he was dragged out of the coffin. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai crawled out of the coffin in fear and worry. She dragged her wedding dress out of the coffin and stumbled to the ground. She reached out and grabbed his hand. Ji Yongchuan felt his slightly cold fingers being held by her warm hand. He looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai lying on the ground, holding on to him tightly. She wanted to cry. "Let's run quickly." Ji Yongchuan lowered his head and slowly revealed a strange smile. His fingers tightened. Finally, his sacrificial offering caught him. "Transmigration system, my Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration 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 system, my Prince Charming, come here." Comma. Chapter 420. Wei Wei Bai nodded, indicating that she understood. Just as she stepped over the white line, she saw an extremely strange scene. Beyond the white line was the road of dawn, and above it was the day when the sun had just risen. And her other foot that had not yet stepped out, the graveyard was still gloomy at night. This extremely illogical scene made one's hair stand on end. Wei Wei Bai had goosebumps all over. She was just about to completely leave the graveyard's night and escape to the human road. "Damn it, let go of me." Suddenly, Ji Yongchuan's angry voice came. She turned around and saw that he was actually lying on the ground. All the ghosts were pulling Ji Yongchuan's feet. None of them chased after Wei Wei Bai, because every ghost coveted the Ghost King who had lost his power. Eat him. He could become the next Ghost King. This made 100 ghosts go crazy. One ghost after another, like a human pyramid, they were all squeezed together, thousands of ghost hands pulling Ji Yongchuan. And the graveyard also became a huge black whirlpool. There were mournful ghost cries below. Below the whirlpool was a bottomless abyss of hell. Wei Wei Bai's scalp was numb, her face was pale, and her whole body was electrified with fear. Even if the prehistoric Godzilla breathed fire at her, she could easily face it. Only when faced with these ghost things. She couldn't wait to give up on the guide and run away. The system couldn't help but remind, if the male lead is pulled down, there will be no more male lead. Wei Wei Bai took a few deep breaths. "Shut up, of course I know." After she finished, she finally stuffed her heart that was scared to the throat into her chest, and then pulled her feet back from the human road. Without hesitation, she turned around and rushed, seeing that Ji Yongchuan was about to be pulled down by thousands of evil ghosts. She used all her strength, stretched out her hands, and in a perfect leap, she grabbed his hand. Ji Yongchuan's whole body trembled, and he suddenly looked up. He saw Wei Wei Bai's eyes were filled with tears of fear, and desperately rushed over. Then, she reached out and grabbed his hand. Her hands were filled with fear and sweat, but she used all her strength to hold on to him without any hesitation. Ji Yongchuan looked at her blankly, as if he didn't understand why she didn't run away. Just now, she had clearly stepped out of the cemetery and was about to return to the human world. Why did he come back? Wei Wei Bai immediately gave the answer. "Little brother, hurry up and run. I'm coming to save you." Her face was deathly pale, and her bloodless lips trembled. She was so scared that she could faint at any moment. Ji Yongchuan felt as if something had moved in his empty chest. He was clearly not human and did not have a living heart. However, when she grabbed him, it made him think that his heart was alive and even beating. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -10. Ji Yongchuan suddenly said, "What's that tied to your arm?" The Ghost King imprint on her body would release the power of the Bai family. It was definitely because of the existence of something, and it was impossible to directly tamper with the Ghost King imprint. Wei Wei Bai looked up blankly. She suddenly thought of something and let go of one hand. Then she reached under her t-shirt and her fingers traced along her chest, groping upwards. Ji Yongchuan looked up and saw that her short t-shirt was open, revealing a large amount of white and smooth skin. He could even faintly see her underwear. His eyes trembled and his throat tightened. Wei Wei Bai's eyes suddenly lit up. She felt a red talisman above her collarbone. When this talisman was taken out, Ji Yongchuan couldn't help but feel fear. This thing, to ghosts, was simply a nuclear bomb. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Collect button below to record this reading record.